When I turned the ignition to leave that rest stop, I saw something in my rearview mirror that made my blood run cold. A figure standing exactly where nobody had been 2 seconds before. But let me back up and tell you how the whole thing started. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Portland to Denver, and around 12:30 a.m. I pulled into this little-known truck stop near a small town in Idaho. The place looked half abandoned, just one flickering streetlight illuminating some empty containers by a warehouse building. I parked in the far corner where truckers usually sleep for the night. My shift had been brutal, nearly 11 hours straight, and exhaustion was pulling at my eyelids. I killed the engine and noticed an old pickup truck sitting near the warehouse, dirty, with a busted headlight. The whole area felt wrong somehow, but I was too tired to care. I've been on the road 15 years running reefers, and I've seen sketchy spots, but this one had that hollow, nobody's watching feel, which is funny, because that's when someone always is. I locked the doors out of habit, cracked the window a touch for air, and told myself I'd knock out 45 minutes and reassess. The light kept buzzing, on off, like it was trying to make up its mind. I pulled my cap down, shifted in the seat, and tried not to think about the pickup. I closed my eyes trying to catch some sleep, but that damn flickering light kept me awake. Frustrated, I opened my eyes and glanced at my side mirror. There was a silhouette standing by the pickup, a man just standing completely still, like he was studying my truck. I figured it was probably a security guard or another driver, so I tried to ignore it and relax. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand I don't spook easy. 15 winters over mountain passes, a few idiots trying doors at 3 a.m., you learn patterns, and the pattern here was off. About 20 minutes passed when nature called, and I had to step out to use the bushes behind the warehouse. I grabbed my flashlight, but I didn't click it on, just kept it in my hand so I wouldn't broadcast where I was. 'Cause you never know. The pickup was still there, but the man was gone. I looked around the parking lot. Nobody in sight. That emptiness made the wind feel louder, like the night was pushing me along. So I hurried through my business and headed back to the truck. When I climbed back into the cab, I spotted something on my hood, a crumpled rag that definitely hadn't been there before. I froze with one knee still on the step and just stared at it, feeling that quick calculation kick in. Did I miss it earlier? Did someone get that close without me hearing? Why leave it there? I locked the doors again, hard, then leaned forward to see if it was moving. It wasn't, and I told myself it was probably nothing. I stepped back out to remove the rag and noticed dark stains on it. Looked like blood, or maybe motor oil. The fabric was damp and cold, like someone had just pulled it out of water. My heart started pounding as I threw it onto the asphalt and scanned the area. Still nobody around. "Real funny," I said out loud, which sounded dumber than I meant it to. Talking helps sometimes, keeps you moving. Telling myself it was just someone's stupid prank, I climbed back into the cab and locked all the doors. I killed the interior lights, thumbed the key without starting, and listened. Sleep was impossible now. I sat there staring into the darkness beyond my windows. 10, 15 minutes. I checked my reefer temp, 34, steady. Checked the mirrors again. Checked the time, 1:47. Around 2 a.m., I heard a scraping sound coming from the trailer side. Metal dragging against metal, slow and deliberate. Not wind, not a branch. It was that long, ugly sound that makes your teeth hurt. I slid lower in the seat, angled the mirror with 2 fingers. Looking in my mirror, I could make out a figure slowly walking around my truck, running something sharp along the side panel. Not rushed, not drunk stumbling, methodical. I thought about hitting the horn, but I didn't want to blind spook whoever it was into doing something worse, and I didn't want to advertise that I was fully awake and watching. "Hey," I called through the glass, not shouting, just enough to test if he'd react. The scraping paused, then started again nearer the back doors like he was tracing the latch. which made my stomach drop, because if he compromised that seal, my delivery became a problem, and my job became a bigger one. I grabbed my phone to call the cops, but there was no signal. This rest stop was in a dead zone. I fired up the engine and hit the high beams. The person jerked back and disappeared behind the warehouse. Not waiting to see if he'd come back, I pulled out of that parking lot and drove a couple miles down the road to a well-lit gas station. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel the entire time. I kept checking my mirrors like a tick, half expecting those dead headlights to reappear. But the road stayed empty, which helped me focus on the lane and the next turn and just getting somewhere that wasn't a trap. I parked by the outer pump under the brightest canopy light, nose out for a quick exit, killed the lights, but left the engine idling, and watched the entrance for a few minutes just to see if anyone tailed me. Nobody did. Inside, the attendant glanced up, then back to his crossword. I bought coffee and water, paid cash, and returned to the cab to wait for daylight. By first light, I could see the trailer skin, and my stomach tightened because the first thing that hit was a long silver scar catching the morning. I walked the length with my phone out, documenting, because insurance doesn't care about stories. They want images and times. Deep scratches ran almost end to end, chest-high swaths where someone had dragged a blade or crowbar slow and steady. The door seals were intact, the lock was good, but the metal was marked like someone was outlining a plan. On the asphalt under the rear doors, there was a note held down by a rock. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Red marker, block letters that leaned a little, like the writer kept checking over a shoulder. 4 words: next time you won't leave. My stomach dropped, and then I got practical again. Photos of the note, the rock, the hinges, the scratches front to back, step by step so I didn't miss anything. I drove straight to the nearest police station and filed a report, showed them the note and photos of the scratches. The officer at the desk took my ID, asked for the bill of lading number, asked me to start from the beginning, so I laid it out clean with times and distances and the dead zone and the warehouse corner. He studied the note and told me without cameras at that rest stop, there wasn't much they could do beyond a report and a heads up to county. I asked about prints, and he said marker on paper like that doesn't hold much, and my handling muddied it anyway. And the rock was worse. He typed while I talked, printed a case number, said they'd patrol the area more frequently. His tone said vagrant, teenage nonsense, maybe copper thieves scoping trailers. I signed where he pointed, emailed the photos, called dispatch from the lot, and got back on the road. I kept that note in my glove compartment for months, too scared to throw it away but too disturbed to look at it. Since that night, I've never stopped at an empty rest stop, no matter how tired I am. I choose truck stops with security and drivers and cameras that work. Sometimes at night when I'm crossing Idaho, I think about that figure in the darkness and the way the blade sounded on my trailer. I don't know who it was or what they wanted from me. Maybe a drifter. Maybe someone with darker intentions. Whatever the case, I'm not taking chances anymore. Not when it's that quiet and isolated in the middle of nowhere. I realized someone wanted me dead when the Honda started reversing straight at me. But let me back up. It was late March, around 9 p.m., and I was driving my Peterbilt eastbound on I-80 through Nebraska, hauling auto parts from Omaha to Denver. The temperature had dropped to freezing. The heater was blasting full power, but cold air still leaked through the door seals. Traffic was almost non-existent. I hadn't seen another vehicle for 20 minutes. Then this gray Honda Accord appeared in my side mirror, staying exactly 50 meters behind me, even though the left lane was completely empty. At first I didn't think much of it, but after 10 minutes the Honda was still there, same distance, like it was tethered by an invisible rope. Most drivers pass trucks at the first opportunity. I'm doing exactly 65 per my logbook, but cars usually fly by at 80. So I nudged the cruise down to 60 to see if he'd go around, and he eased down too. I bumped it up to 70, and the gap stayed fixed. Out here you learn patterns, and this wasn't one I liked. A green sign flashed past. 24-hour Shell, 2 miles. I put on my blinker like I was just getting coffee. 1 beat later, his right blinker clicked on as well, and that was when the hair on the back of my neck finally did its job. I took the exit and rolled past the pumps to the back lot where the rigs park. 2 sleepers idled with their curtains drawn. The asphalt had a crust of frost, and the sodium lights made everything look flat. I swung wide, straightened out, and set my brake by the far curb. The Accord didn't stop at the store. It nosed in right beside my cab, passenger door way too close. Even civilians know not to crowd a truck. I cut my lights, killed the engine, and sat for 2 breaths to listen. The Honda's idle was steady, not hunting, not rough. I grabbed my gloves, climbed down, and slammed my door louder than necessary, so he'd know this wasn't going to be a quiet stare down. I walked to his window with my hands visible. Behind the glass, man about 40, Carhartt jacket, sparse beard, receding hairline. He stared dead ahead, hands at 10 and 2 like a driving test photo. Across the hood was a fresh key mark from the left headlight toward the windshield, raw metal showing. "You good?" I said, neutral. "You tailed me a long way. You need help or what?" Nothing. No glance, no shrug. The heater fogged the edges of the windshield from inside. "You can't park here," I added. "This side is trucks only. You're making it unsafe." Still nothing. He blinked once, slow. I tapped the glass twice with my knuckle. Silence, just the idle. I stepped around the front to catch his eyes. My boots squeaked on the frost. In the split second I cleared the headlight, the idle roared and the hood jumped. I threw myself left, hip smashing my bumper, and the Honda lunged into the space where my legs had been. The grille kissed my license plate and bounced. I spun, ready to scramble, and saw white reverse lights flare. For half a heartbeat I thought, no way he's actually doing this, and then he was. I ran for my cab and cut into the slot between the fuel tank and the trailer like a rabbit going to ground. Steel on one side, steel on the other, not comfortable, but better than open air. The Honda shot backward, missed my steps by an inch, tires howling, then braked hard enough to nosedive. I tasted blood where I'd bit my tongue. The simple explanations tried to help. Medical issue, drunk, panic. But the way he'd aimed told me different. He slammed it into drive and the nose jerked toward me again. I ducked deeper, catching the grab handle and the airline with my left hand, and shouted toward the dark sleepers, "Hey, call 911. No movement in either cab. The Accord swerved, clipped a concrete wheel stop, thumped, and straightened. For a second I had him in my passenger mirror. His eyes were forward, jaw loose, nothing fired up in his face, like this was a task he'd already practiced. I slid toward my door, keeping the tractor between us, planning to climb up, lock in, and roll. He gunned it across the arrows painted on the asphalt, cut the corner too tight, and fishtailed. He corrected, lined up on the drive, and paused like he thought about finishing it or saving it for later. My hip throbbed hard enough to make my vision pulse. I reached for the handle anyway, because sitting still is how you get pinned. Then he took the decision out of my hands. The Honda vaulted the speed bump on the way out, kissed the curb, and kept going. I jogged 2 steps on reflex, stopped, and listened to the engine wind up as he hit the service road. I kept my body tight to the cab in case he looped back. He didn't. He blasted down the ramp, merged without even pretending to signal, and disappeared onto the highway without using turn signals. I stood there with my back against the cold metal of the trailer, trying to catch my breath and understand what the hell just happened. Called 911, the dispatcher asked for a description, but I couldn't remember the plates, just the gray color, the scratch, and that it was a 90s Honda Accord. I told her he never spoke. He tried to hit me twice, then he left eastbound, no signals, fast. I hung up, stood there another minute listening for that engine, heard only my idle cooling down and the vending machine hum by the store doors. I didn't stay at that gas station overnight, left 5 minutes later, checking my mirrors every 10 seconds. I kept the dash cam rolling and the cab light off so I wouldn't backlight myself. Every pair of headlights in the glass made me brace until they slipped by and shrank. By midnight, I was parked in a lit lot with 3 other rigs, nose out, jacket on, keys where I could reach them. The next day around noon, I got stuck in traffic on Route 76 near Sterling. Red and blue lights flashing ahead, cars crawling at walking speed. The radio said crash in the left lane, expect delays. The cone tapers squeezed us into the right lane, and a trooper with a wand walked the zipper, sending us through one by one. When I reached the accident site, I looked over and saw what I was pretty sure was that same Honda Accord with the identical scratch on the hood, except now the entire front end was crushed like an accordion. The metal was folded up to the windshield. The hood was buckled where I'd seen that key mark. Next to it lay an overturned Ford pickup, roof caved in, windows blown out. Tools were scattered, socket set, pry bar, a red cooler popped open and empty. Paramedics were loading someone onto a stretcher into an ambulance, but I couldn't see the face. An EMT yelled for a collar. Another trooper pulled crime scene tape but didn't use it. A wrecker idled with its boom half raised. I kept pace with the truck in front of me and tried to see the Honda's driver's seat through the spidered glass and the curtain airbags. Nothing. A firefighter kicked debris out of the lane with the toe of his boot and waved us to keep moving. I shifted up, rolled past, and checked the scratch again in my mirror. Same path from the headlight toward the cowl, like someone had dragged a key and then fate had finished the job. I looked for the Honda's driver among the people on the shoulder. Nobody matched. Drove on, and I kept thinking, to be honest, that guy is either in the hospital, dead, or something else I don't want to think about. I still don't know why he was following me or why he tried to run me over. Maybe he mistook me for someone else. Maybe he had a psychotic break. Or maybe I accidentally saw something on the highway earlier that I wasn't supposed to see. I quit the company 2 months later and stopped driving long hauls. Sometimes, even now, late at night I wonder if that accident was really an accident, or if he was trying to finish what he started with someone else. The police never contacted me, so I guess my 911 call didn't connect to anything. I changed careers after that. Now I work at a warehouse doing inventory, and every time I see a gray Honda in the parking lot, my heart rate spikes. The CB radio had been dead silent for hours when my headlights caught the Kenworth blocking both lanes, engine running, driver's door hanging wide open. But let me back up. I was hauling electronics from Portland to Philly, one of those coast-to-coast runs that pays well but drains your soul. This was my 4th year doing long haul, and I'd learned to love the empty stretches through the Midwest where you can zone out and just drive. Around 10 p.m. I'd stopped at a Shell station, grabbed some questionable hot dogs and a Mountain Dew, then got back on Route 70 heading east through Indiana. The CB was tuned to Channel 19 like always, but nobody was talking that night, which was weird because usually there's at least some chatter. Road empty, sky clean, mind quiet. Mostly. CB was on Channel 19 like always, but nobody was chirping, which was weird. I had maybe 3 hours left before my planned stop in Indianapolis, and the road was hypnotically straight through corn and driveways. Then my lows washed over a wall of chrome and blue paint sitting sideways, trailer blocking both lanes. No hazard, no flares, No cruiser. Just that rig, idling, decided the interstate was closed now. Instinct said ease up, so I feathered the brake, dropped a gear, and let the Jake chatter. My trailer tugged like a stubborn dog but settled. I rolled to a stop about 50 feet back and set my brakes. For a moment I stared at that open door expecting a wave around that never came. I grabbed my flashlight, killed my aux lights, and climbed down. The Kenworth just idled there. Up close, it was a dark blue W900, sitting there with hazards off and the driver's door open. I called, "Driver?" And the corn swallowed it. The seat was empty. On it, a crumpled Carhartt jacket. In the cup holder, a stainless thermos that felt warm against my fingers, not hot, not cold. The CB mic hung on its coil, swinging, tapping the dash like someone had dropped it and walked. Walked the trailer. Company name said furniture. Doors sealed with a bolt tag. No dents, no scrapes. I leaned in across the seat and checked the dash. A cracked smartphone sat face down. When I tapped the button, it flashed a dead battery icon. The logbook on the clipboard showed the last entry at 8 p.m. Printed on the cover, Marcus Delaney, 42, driver, Cleveland. That sat wrong in my stomach. I pulled my phone and dialed 911. I gave the mile marker, eastbound, and said I was a driver stopped behind a running W900 blocking both lanes with no operator in sight. She took my name, carrier, and plate numbers and asked about injuries. No people visible, no blood that I could see. She told me not to touch anything else on scene and to move back to my vehicle. I said I would, and headed back slow, keeping the Kenworth in my lights. Climbing in, I locked both doors, set the seat high, and put the wheel straight so my beam stayed on his dash. The mic on my own CB felt useless. Channel 19 had been dead since Illinois. I told the dispatcher that, plus the thermos being warm and the phone dead, and the last log at 8. She typed while I listened to faint radio chatter beneath her voice. I asked about ETA because I had to think about my hours. She said units were coming from the county seat, at least 30 minutes, middle of nowhere, so keep my hazards on and stay visible. I flipped the four-ways, set my strobes, and tugged on my vest because that's muscle memory. I checked mirrors again, nothing behind me. Now, before I explain anything else, you need to know driver etiquette. We don't park sideways unless we're trying to stop a bigger problem or we're forced. Keys in, gear neutral, brakes set. Someone did that on purpose. That's not panic. So either Marcus stopped something, or something stopped Marcus. My eyes kept drifting to the narrow gap between his trailer and the corn, the kind of path someone might choose. I cracked my window an inch to listen, and instantly regretted it. Every rustle felt 6 feet away. I shut it and told the dispatcher the scene felt unsecured. She kept me talking, taking make and model, plates, bill of lading. I hit the air horn once, long, in case Marcus was nearby. Nothing. She calm repeated herself. She told me to stay in my vehicle and not touch anything else. I waited in my cab with the doors locked, watching that empty Kenworth in my headlights. The state police finally rolled up around 12:45 a.m. Older Crown Vic, 2 troopers, both looking like they were still waking up but trying to look official. One tapped my door and I cracked it enough to hand over my license and bills. We did the quick run-through. My name, carrier, time on scene, what I touched, thermos, logbook, that's it. And I pointed out how the CB mic was dangling when I got there. They took it in without a lot of reaction, just that tight nod cops do when they're collecting blocks for a report. They split up. One trooper climbed the Kenworth, checked the cab with a gloved hand, popped the sleeper curtain, and leaned in with a small flashlight sweeping the mattress seams and the floorboard. He called out. There was no wallet visible, no keys beyond the ignition, no signs of a fight. The other trooper walked the shoulder, slow, sweeping a big handheld spotlight into the grass and over the fence line. He had that far-off stare like he was imagining where he'd run if he was the guy. I sat in my seatbelt and kept my hazard lights punching the dark. They ran the plates, got the hit, registered to a Marcus Delaney, route westbound originally, then east somehow. Dispatcher last heard from him at 8 p.m. The cab number matched the insurance card in the visor. I added that the thermos was warm, phone dead, and the last logbook entry said 8 p.m. One of them said, "So not long," and the other asked if I'd seen any vehicles parked or moving when I arrived. Negative. Nobody. Not even a tail light on the horizon. Which is insane for I-70, right? That shoulder search got interesting. The spotlight froze and the trooper waved his partner over. Small hand circle, not yelling. They both stepped down into the grass. Couple seconds later I heard tracks, and then multiple. I got out when they waved me and we stood at the edge, my boots on the asphalt, theirs in the grass. Deep ruts in the tall stuff like heavy SUVs or vans had pulled in and sat there a while, the stalks bent and dead, a few cigarette butts mashed down where doors would open. Fresh enough you could feel soft dirt under the crust. Whatever was there had backed out easy and left no debris. They called it in for backup and a K9, tone shifting from odd stoppage to crime scene. One kept the roadway with me while the other started placing cones and popping flares further back. He asked me again about the timing and if I heard raised voices or a horn before I stopped. I told him the CB had been dead for hours. He glanced at the open Kenworth door like it might answer. Then they took a quick recorded statement on a body cam. Same facts, mile marker, what I touched, what I saw, and had me blow into a small tube because policy. Clean. He said, "You're good to roll if you want. We've got it from here." I hesitated. Then I eased my truck around through the narrow gap they'd made with cones, mirrors inches from the furniture trailer. As I pulled away, I watched in the mirrors while they stretched yellow tape from my side of the shoulder to the fence post, and then across the median, shutting the eastbound completely. The Crown Vic's light bar flickering over that open cab and the dead quiet corn. I shifted up, and the scene slid backward like a stage set going dark. The Kenworth still idling alone under my lights until the bend took it. For the next few weeks I kept checking news alerts and driver forums and the state police blotter, and it just never turned into anything solid. Like they poured every hour into it and still pulled up mud. They did a 20-mile radius with dogs and drones. They canvassed every truck stop cashier and fuel desk and shower attendant. They yanked camera footage from toll booths and rural gas pumps 50 miles each way. And it all added up to Marcus leaving a running truck and then evaporating. His family hired a PI who called me once and asked the same questions. Was there a smell of coolant? Did I see any footprints on the hood? Had I noticed any chalk marks on the shoulder? No to all of it. The cargo list matched the seals, furniture still strapped and untouched. Cops floated a theory on the record that he got lured out by someone he knew, or off the record that he saw a stranded car and didn't realize it was staged. And those tire ruts said staging to me, like they'd sat there long enough to get bored. And I still run that line twice a month, and when I hit mile marker 147, I kill the cruise, and I watch my mirrors, and I remember that warm thermos, and I've changed how I do things. I don't stop on empty interstate for anything I can't see end to end. I call it in and keep rolling till there's people around. And yeah, it eats at me that if I'd hit that stretch 20 minutes earlier, I might have seen something, or I might have been the other rig boxed in. And the worst part is it felt clean, like they practiced. Like whatever took Marcus is still out there watching for a guy who thinks stepping down with a flashlight won't cost him his whole life. Three times in one night I saw the same gray pickup with a busted headlight. First at a gas station in Tonopah, then 40 miles south. then somehow ahead of me again on an empty highway I never saw it pass me on. I'm Mark Kendall. I run cement and steel between Reno and Vegas, Highway 95. Been doing this 8 years, so I don't spook easy. That October night in 2019, I pulled out of Tonopah a little after midnight with a full trailer of cement bags and rebar, paperwork clean, seals on the rear doors checked twice because the yard manager's a stickler, and I've learned to be too. Weeknights out there are dead. Long straightaways, the occasional jackrabbit, a lone pair of headlights way out, then gone. Around 1 a.m., north of Goldfield, I came up on an old Ford on the shoulder, early 90s body, gray paint beat to hell, right headlight completely smashed. Someone was behind the wheel, still as stone, no hazards, no movement. I logged the mile marker in my head and kept rolling. You don't stop for everything out here. Too many setups, too many bad outcomes. So I just watched him slide by in the mirror until he was a dark shape, and then nothing. 40 minutes later, near Coaldale Junction, there it was again. Same truck, same busted headlight, parked on the shoulder like it never moved. I eased off the throttle because, yeah, I was confused. 95 is straight out there, wide open, no turnoffs worth a damn. I told myself there's more than one gray Ford in the world, and more than one idiot driving with a broken headlight. Coincidences happen. I rolled back into it. The radio was dead air, and I was sipping burned coffee that tasted like coins, thinking about a way station schedule down south and how I'd make Pahrump by sunrise if I didn't get hung up. About 30 minutes after that, I caught up to a vehicle crawling in my lane, and my stomach did this small twist because I already knew what I was going to see. Same Ford. It wobbled a little, like the driver couldn't decide where the white line was. In my high beams, I had him clear, middle-aged, baseball cap tugged low, hands stuck at 10 and 2, eyes straight ahead, face blank like a mannequin. I tapped the horn and slid left to pass. He didn't look. He didn't speed up. He just held that dead center stare. I got around him, checked the mirrors twice. He was there, then he wasn't. Like the desert ate his taillights. I even kicked the dash to wake up, muttered, "Stay with it, Mark," and counted off 60, then 90, then checked again. Empty road stretching behind me like a runway to nowhere. By then my hands were shaking just enough to annoy me, not fear exactly, more like an itch I couldn't scratch. I pulled into a closed rest area outside Goldfield, the one with the busted soda machine and 2 dead streetlights, to breathe and walk the rig. Quick stop, in and out. The air was cold, still. That kind of desert quiet where you hear the tick of the cooling engine and your own boots on gravel. Nothing else. I killed the headlights but left the markers on and grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket. Habit. Check the drive tires, look for nails, feel the hubs, listen for anything off with the brakes. Everything seemed normal on the tractor. No air leaks, no hot smell, just me and the wind that wasn't there. I went to the back to eyeball the doors before I rolled again. I always do this when something's nagging me, call it superstition, call it experience. And that's when I saw it. The seal wire on the swing doors hanging loose, tag snapped clean. Not torn or kinked. Cut. I stood there with my hand on the latch feeling stupid for a half second because I'd checked it in Tonopah. I know I had. The number on the manifest matched. I remember reading it out loud to myself like I always do. "No way," I said, just like that. And I looked around out of reflex. Empty lot, empty road, the desert pressing its face against the fence like always. I popped the doors and put the flashlight up in the air with my wrist locked. You get used to doing everything one-handed on a ladder, then climbed up onto the bumper and swung the beam down the center aisle. Pallets of Portland cement stacked tight, stretch wrap intact, bands on the rebar bundles cinched hard. On first glance, perfect. I told myself I was going to reseal and call dispatch at Beatty, tell them I had a broken tag and a clean load, All CYA stuff, and be gone in 3 minutes. But halfway down the trailer, jammed sideways between two pallets where there shouldn't be any gap at all, was a dark canvas duffel about 3 feet long. No labels, no straps showing, like it had been shoved and wedged so it wouldn't slide during braking. That bag hadn't been there in Reno. I climbed in, careful not to bust the shrink wrap, and crouched, feeling the trailer flex under my weight. I put my hand under the duffel and tried to lift. It came up an inch, and then it didn't. Heavy in a way. Cement is heavy, but not solid. It shifted wrong, like dense, soft stuff moving inside. And every part of me said, don't mess with this. Get out. Call somebody. But I couldn't let it go without at least knowing if it was going to rupture or contaminate my freight. So I braced a knee and tested it again. 80, maybe 90 pounds. Dead weight with a little give. Not tools, not metal, not product. I angled the flashlight in close to see if there was a zipper or tag. The canvas showed dark patches along one seam. Stains, I told myself, were oil or grease until my light hit them right, and they turned that dull rust color nobody mistakes once they've seen it. I backed out of the trailer fast, slammed the doors, and jogged to the cab with the flashlight bouncing off my thigh. No bars on the phone, typical for that stretch, so there wasn't any calling ahead or asking for advice. I fired up the Kenworth, air hissed, gauges came alive, and I rolled out, nose pointed north toward Tonopah because that was the closest building with a badge on the front. I told myself I'd turn in the whole rig, the bag, my manifest, let them sort chain of custody and all that. Just keep it by the book. 10 miles up, mirror check out of habit, and there it was. One bright headlight, one sick flicker, sitting 100 yards back and glued there. I eased up to 75, which is dumb with 40,000 pounds of palletized cement behind you. But the Ford matched me perfect, like my foot was his foot. It didn't gain, didn't drop, just sat there in the blind spot of my gut. When the glow of Tonopah leaked up over the grade, the pickup snapped right onto a dirt access cut and vanished like it had a hole in the desert to crawl into. I blew through the main drag, right turn to the sheriff's office lot, killed the engine, and walked inside with my hands up like I was already in trouble. The deputy on the graveyard shift had a crew cut and the slow blink of a guy 3 hours from relief. I laid it out. Broken seal, unknown bag, followed by a gray Ford with a busted headlight, attempted to get here fast. He asked for plate numbers. I didn't have them. He asked if I'd opened the bag. I said no. He went outside with me, shined his mag light at the cut seal, and sucked his teeth. I can't open a commercial trailer without owner consent or a warrant, he said. Not unkind, just policy. Call your dispatcher, get the owner to authorize, or we park it until a judge is awake. I dialed my boss, then the after-hours line, then his personal again, straight to voicemail. It was 3 a.m. The deputy shrugged like, "What do you want me to do?" He offered coffee. He offered a place to park in their fenced lot. He took my name and license and the trailer number and wrote a note for his sergeant. He suggested I park it and grab a nap in the sleeper till morning, said they'd keep an eye on it. I paced the lot twice and felt every minute like an hour. I was wired and also wrecked, a bad mix. I kept thinking about my delivery window in Vegas and how a missed slot gets you slapped with a fee and your dispatcher chewing your ear off for a week. Stupid priority, yeah, but that's the job. Keep freight moving, don't make waves unless you have to. I thanked him, told him I'd circle back if I got the boss on the phone, and he gave me that look cops give when they can't stop you from doing the thing you're about to do. I rolled south with the cab smelling like overheated coffee and rubber, checking mirrors way too often. The highway was empty again, just me and the line and the sun threatening behind the ranges. By the time I hit the Beltway, the sky was gray and my eyes felt like sand. I pulled into the site at 7:50, backed into the mud, and handed over the bill of lading to a foreman with a radio clipped to his vest. The crew moved fast, forklift forks under the pallets, bands popped, everything set down in a rough square on hard dirt. The canvas bag came out in the chaos, one of the laborers dragging it by a corner, asking if it was extra. I said it wasn't on my manifest. He shrugged and tossed it onto the pile with a grunt, while the driver started jabbing pallet plastic with a box cutter. I stood there, waiting for an opening to explain. Then the foreman yelled they were behind and needed the rebar staged, and the rhythm of the place just swallowed me. 3 days later, on my 10, I scrolled the local news and saw a piece about a body found near Coaldale. Shallow grave off 95, male, missing 2 months, no name released. They asked for tips from anyone who'd been in the area in early October. I stared at the sheriff's number in my call log and felt my thumb hover. I didn't press it. I told myself I hadn't seen inside the bag. I couldn't swear to anything. I didn't know when or where that seal got cut, and I didn't want to walk into a station with "I moved freight that may be evidence" as my opener. I shifted my routes after that. Day runs only, no stopping at that rest area, no exceptions, and I slow down every time I see a gray Ford on the shoulder. Sometimes I tell myself the pickup was just some local pacing traffic, that I got spun up over nothing, that 3 sightings in one night could happen. But that busted headlight, the exact same damage every single time, it doesn't let me believe it. Back in 2006, I was tired of my small-town life in Texas and jumped at the chance when my boyfriend Jason offered to hit the road as truckers. 6 months were incredible. I saw California, Florida, Chicago, places I'd dreamed about. We worked as a team. He drove while I handled paperwork and loading. On long stretches, we chatted on the CB, and that's how we met Gremlin. His voice popped up whenever we ran I-40 through New Mexico and Arizona, cracking jokes about patrol, scales, coffee tasting like diesel. Then he'd drift into wreck stories with too many details. The color of a kid's sneakers in the median. Safety glass looks like sugar. And Jason would laugh because that's what you do. I laughed, but I kept notes. Exit numbers, towns, coincidences that didn't sit right. Now, before I explain what happened next, no, we weren't careless. We kept doors locked, didn't pick anyone up, parked under lights often. But the CB makes strangers feel familiar. Familiar lowers your guard. That winter channel buzzed about a missing hitchhiker between Albuquerque and Amarillo, backpack with pins. Jason asked Gremlin if he'd heard. He laughed and said girls disappear when they pick the wrong truck. That evening we shut down at the truck stop near Santa Rosa, 20 rigs nose to tail. I took a shower and walked back out with a beanie on. Jason stood by the passenger door looking pale. He said there was a flyer about the hitchhiker by the register and then pointed to the next row. Parked by pumps sat a black Peterbilt with tinted windows and a grill guard. On the door was a skull sticker with the word Gremlin in Gothic letters. We stared because seeing that sticker made the chatter feel real. We exchanged glances and decided to introduce ourselves. He was sort of our friend from the radio. Jason didn't want to look like he was snooping, so we walked up like normal folks, hands empty. No cameras out, no phones, just quick smiles like we were saying thanks for a lane change. Jason knocked on the passenger door, 2 quick raps, then another. A warm lamp glowed behind the tint. Nobody answered. He tried, "Breaker Gremlin, you around?" in a half-joking voice that didn't sound like him. Still nothing. He waited, knocked again. The lot's air brakes and hisses filled the pause. I felt practical prickle you get when something isn't adding up and you don't want to say why loud. Jason's hand flexed once at his side like he was debating another knock. We started to walk away, but the passenger window was cracked a finger for air. I bent to look in. On the floor were women's high-heeled shoes, patent leather with the heel cap missing, and a torn purse on mat. The strap was ripped. Makeup was scattered like it had been dumped fast. There was a smear on the panel. Not proof of anything, but enough to change our plan. I grabbed Jason's sleeve and said, "We're leaving," and pulled him toward our truck. He didn't argue or ask for a second look. He followed me, jaw tight, eyes forward. We cut behind 2 reefers, kept tractors between us and the Peterbilt. We didn't run. We didn't stare. At our steps, Jason fumbled the key once, and I told him to breathe so he'd stop shaking the cab. We climbed in and locked both doors. He set the key without turning it. "We can't just bounce," he said, meaning the shoes and the purse. "We won't," I said. "We'll call from the road." I pulled the Qualcomm and typed a message to dispatch. Possible evidence: Pete with skull decal, row C, Santa Rosa. I hovered on send, listening for footsteps in gravel that didn't come. My thumb shook and I pictured a badge reading it later. Jason turned the engine over soft. We eased out, took the perimeter, and avoided passing that truck. I watched the mirrors. Nothing moved. At the exit, blinker ticking, Jason asked, "You saw what I saw?" I said yes. He nodded. We didn't say much to each other, but we were both thinking the same thing. That night we turned on the radio, and Gremlin's voice came back on. He was chatting with someone about cutting south to Phoenix to dodge weather. Jason grabbed the mic and asked, "Gremlin, is that you in the black Peterbilt at the Santa Rosa stop?" There was a long pause, then laughter came through the speaker. "Well, aren't you observant, Jay?" "Yeah, that's me. Saw you standing at my door." His voice went colder. "Curiosity's a dangerous thing, especially for that girl of yours." Jason dropped the mic like it burned, turned the key, and we rolled. I told him I'd call the cops at the first exit with lights. We pulled out in the middle of the night, skipped fuel, didn't scale, didn't even grab a receipt. Jason looped the outer lane so we wouldn't pass his row. I watched the mirrors until the lot was gone. At the first lit exit, there was a closed diner and 1 patrol car parked dark. I called from our cab, gave the dispatcher the make, the skull sticker, the shoes and torn purse, and the threat he made on the air. She asked for a plate. I didn't have one. She said they'd note it. We stayed on 40 to Tucumcari and killed the radio because we didn't want him tracking our chatter. Twice, Jason asked if I was sure about what I saw on his floor. I said yes both times and reminded him that reporting it was the only move. What were we supposed to do? Break into a stranger's truck and escalate? He kept our speed 2 under, hugged right, blinkers early, everything textbook. We swapped at dawn, hands tight even when we traded seats. We didn't sleep. We just drove. Every black tractor with tint made me count lug nuts. For the next week, we avoided that corridor, took loads north or south, moved in daylight when we could. We picked smaller stops where cameras covered pumps and doors. The CB stayed off except at shipper gates. I called the Santa Rosa sheriff again, added the timestamps, the exact row, the skull decal. The deputy said they were aware of the chatter but didn't have anything they could act on without a plate or a witness placing someone. Fine. We kept our heads down, didn't tell other drivers more than bad vibes. Nothing happened, which somehow made the fear feel organized. 2 weeks later, the news ran a short segment on the little TV in a dispatch office in Oklahoma City. A reporter said they found the hitchhiker's body in a ravine 50 miles from Santa Rosa. No cause released. Investigators seeking tips from drivers who might have seen a dark rig. The room went quiet in that way. Road people go quiet. A guy by the microwave said he'd seen the same flyer at a Love's. Jason stared at a corkboard like it could help. That night we flipped the CB for 5 minutes. No gremlin. Either he changed handles, or he went dark. We worked another 6 months, but the rhythm never came back. I jumped at every black truck drifting into our lane. Jason started sleeping with a tire thumper wedged by his footwell even while I drove. We were careful before. After that we were surgical. Doors latched, curtains clipped, no unlit parking, no shower unless we went in together. Eventually we quit long haul and went separate ways, because the job and us weren't the same. I still don't know if Gremlin was involved, but my gut says yes, and I hate that all I had to give the cops was a sticker and a pair of shoes. So this happened back in early November when I was driving from Portland to Spokane to visit my sister. I left around 8:30 a.m. for what's usually a 6-hour drive on Route 84, something I do 3 or 4 times a year. Normally I'd stop once at a gas station near Hermiston, but that day I decided to push through without brakes to arrive before dark. By 4 p.m. I was already in eastern Washington, the sun hanging low over the horizon, painting the wheat fields copper. Traffic was sparse, maybe 1 or 2 cars per minute, mostly local farmers and pickups. On a straight stretch of road where there wasn't a single house for a mile, I saw a blue Freightliner with a refrigerated trailer parked on the shoulder. No hazard lights blinking, engine not running, but the driver's side door was wide open. I do this drive a lot, like podcast on low, cruise set, eyes bouncing between the road and the rear view, so that kind of thing stuck out. I kept thinking maybe the driver got sick or the truck died or he'd stepped out to flag someone down and then… what? Forgot to close the door. I rolled the window down as I eased past. No movement. The cab looked dead except for an open thermos on the passenger seat. The trailer had that faint, chalky frost line on the latch like the cooler had been running recently. I told myself someone else would stop, but the shoulder there is basically just gravel and scrub and then forest. No houses, no store, nothing. And I couldn't shake the idea I'd read later about a guy who died of a stroke while 100 cars sailed by. So I looped around at the next wide spot and came back slow, hazards on, trying to decide if I should just call highway patrol from my car or actually get out and check. I know, don't be a hero, but there was no one else in sight and it felt wrong to leave. I slowed down and stopped about 20 meters behind the truck, turned off my engine and got out of my Subaru. Walked up to the cab, looked inside. Nobody there, keys still in the ignition, an open thermos of coffee on the seat with steam still rising from it. No phone on the dashboard, but a baseball cap with a Cascade Freight logo was lying on the floor. To the right of the road, a dense forest began, spruce and cedar trees forming a solid wall that barely let any light through. I called out, "Hey, does anyone need help?" My voice sounded muffled and got no response. The silence was total. Even the birds weren't singing. I stood on tiptoe and checked the step on the passenger side. No footprints in the dust, at least none I could make out. I did a quick look around the rear of the trailer, didn't touch anything, and started back toward my car, pulling out my phone to call highway patrol. That's when I heard a branch crack behind me. It wasn't wind. It was that clean, dry snap of weight on dead wood. I turned halfway, phone in my hand, and said, "Hello?" to the trees like an idiot. Nothing answered. I took 2 slow steps, and the gravel under my shoes sounded too loud, like I'd just told the whole county I was there. I hesitated with 911 open on my screen. I figured if the guy had gone to take a leak, he was going to be mad I turned it into a scene. And then there was another crack, closer this time, right where the truck's cab met the shadow of the trailer. "Sir, I'm calling this in," I said, trying to sound official, and my voice bounced off blue paint and died. I started backing up toward my Subaru, eyes locked on that gap, counting the steps to my door. 8, 7, 6. thinking maybe he just fainted and now he was crawling out, and I should be ready to tell dispatch mile markers and a plate number and all that. I turned around and saw a man emerge from behind the truck, about 50 years old in a camouflage jacket, jeans, and heavy boots. In his right hand he held a black pistol pointed at my chest. His face was ordinary, even soft. Round cheeks, gray stubble, heavy eyebrows. But his eyes looked cold and empty, like someone who'd already made a decision. He didn't say a word, just stood there aiming, holding the gun with both hands. I raised my hands palms forward, trying to show I wasn't a threat, but my throat tightened so much I couldn't get out a sound. I said, "I'm just gonna get in my car, okay?" Barely above a whisper. Nothing. He tracked me with the barrel when I shifted a half step, wrists steady, like he'd practiced this. From the trees there was one quick bird chirp and then silence again, like even the woods were waiting to see what happened. I started backing toward my car, slow, eyes on the muzzle. Each step felt like it took a full minute. My heel slipped on the edge of the shoulder. The barrel dipped, then rose with me. "I'm leaving," I said, voice thin, and he blinked once. 4 more steps, and my hip brushed the door. I kept my chest squared to him and reached back with my right hand, fingers scraping the seam for the handle without looking. I found metal, hooked it, pulled. The door popped, bumped my leg. I slid sideways through the gap, keeping my hands up as high as I could, and climbed inside without turning my back to the man. Slammed the door shut, pressed the central lock button. All 4 locks clicked simultaneously. Started the engine, put it in gear, and checked the mirror. The man had lowered his gun and just stood there watching me drive away, not a single emotion on his face. I pulled onto the highway and pushed the gas to 80, even though I usually drive strictly by the speed limit. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel, heart pounding somewhere in my throat. I didn't understand why he didn't shoot. Maybe he just wanted to scare me, or maybe he changed his mind at the last second. The only thing that made any sense in the moment was he thought I was going to rob him or take the truck. But then my brain started pulling up details I hadn't processed while I was standing there. The steam off the coffee, the keys left in the ignition, the missing phone, and how neat the cab was except for that cap tossed on the floor like it had been yanked off fast. I kept checking the rear view every few seconds like he was suddenly going to be behind me, but the road stayed empty. The blue trailer got small, dipped behind the rise, and vanished. I thumbed open the dialer, hovered over 911, and pictured explaining mile markers and how close he'd been and whether he fired. And then I saw myself stuck there waiting for a trooper while that guy walked back up the shoulder with the same blank face, so I locked the phone and tossed it on the passenger seat. I told myself I'd call from the next town, someplace with people around. At the first turnout I slowed, but it was just a strip of gravel and an overflowing trash can and a broken sign. No cameras, no store, just trees. And I got this ugly feeling about how quiet it looked, so I kept going. I replayed the way his elbows tucked in, how steady the muzzle was, like he'd practiced, and I realized he hadn't glanced once toward the trailer, not to check if I was between him and it, not for anything, like the truck was bait or a shield or both. The hot coffee bugged me too. Nobody leaves that long enough to cool unless they're interrupted, and the keys in the ignition meant he didn't intend to be away. I hit a closed way station and pulled into the empty lot, engine running, doors still locked. Sat there watching the highway for 5 minutes, counting vehicles, scanning for blue paint or a reefer trailer drifting into the exit lane. Nothing. I typed a note with the plate number I thought I'd seen, and then deleted it because I wasn't sure I had it right, and I didn't want to get tied to a wrong detail later. I drank warm water, waited until the shake in my hands eased up enough to merge. A few miles on, I passed another semi on the shoulder with hazards on, driver in the cab on his phone, and my foot actually hit the brake for a second out of habit before my chest tightened, and I put it right back down. I I kept thinking about where the missing phone could be. If it was in his pocket, why not call for help? And if it wasn't, who had it? By the time the first Spokane billboard showed up, I'd run the whole scene a dozen times, and none of it added up without landing on something bad. Maybe he was hauling something illegal in that refrigerated trailer and was scared I'd call the cops. Or he was hiding something in the woods that nobody was supposed to find. Or it was just a random encounter between a man on the edge and a stranger at the wrong time in the wrong place. I never found out the truth because I didn't call the police. Too scared they'd drag me into an investigation, make me come back, give statements under oath, maybe testify later. And I had to be back at work on Monday, and I wasn't interested in being the person who poked the nest. When I got to Spokane an hour and a half later, my sister took one look at me and said I looked off, like I was carsick or hadn't slept. And I told her everything in a flat list: truck, open door, coffee, gun, while she stood there saying, "You need to call." And I kept shaking my head and saying, "No, I'm fine, I'm done with it." She offered to make the call herself, said we could drive to a station, that it was the right thing, but I told her I just wanted to forget. I said it 3 times until she let it drop. Now sometimes I think, if that guy really was hiding something and I was the only witness, then I missed a chance to stop something terrible. I still drive that route to visit my sister, but I never stop for stranded vehicles anymore, not even in broad daylight. Every time I pass that section of road, I speed up to 75 and don't look at the shoulder. So this happened about 2 years ago, when I was hauling refrigerated seafood from Atlanta up to Boston. The company I worked for used a route through the Appalachian backroads of West Virginia because it saved about 90 minutes compared to the interstate. But it meant driving through some seriously isolated areas. I left Atlanta around midnight, planning to reach Richmond by early afternoon the next day. First couple hours were fine, mostly empty highway with the occasional passing truck, my CB picking up nothing but static. Around 3 a.m. I stopped at this 24-hour Exxon at a crossroads, filled up, grabbed an energy drink and a ham sandwich from the sketchy hot case. The clerk was half asleep and barely looked at me. Ahead of me was a 60-mile stretch through Daniel Boone National Forest. Nothing but pine trees and darkness, no turnoffs, no gas stations, no rest areas. I rolled out and hit that forest section with cruise set just under the limit, headlights washing over the center lines and that shiny, wet look even though the pavement was dry. Don't ask me why. Some roads just look slick at night. The reefer unit hummed steady behind me, a kind of white noise you stop noticing after a while. I kept one ear on the CB even though it was dead, habit I guess, and took small sips of the drink so I wouldn't end up jittery. It's funny how you can feel when a place is empty, like you're the only machine moving for miles, and you start cataloging every little thing automatically. Mile markers, reflector posts, those green guide signs that never change out here. Maybe 10 miles into the forest section, I spotted someone standing on the shoulder. It was a man in a denim jacket, hands in his pockets, facing away from the road toward the tree line. I eased off the throttle out of instinct. Drivers do that. Looked for a stalled car, hazard flashers, anything. There were no vehicles anywhere, no broken down car, no motorcycles, nothing. I tapped the air horn, one short bleat, nothing. He didn't turn around, didn't wave, didn't move at all. I thought maybe his ride was somewhere in the woods. But why would he just stand there staring into the darkness? I passed him and checked my mirror. He slowly turned his head to watch my truck go by, but still didn't flag me down or anything. Weird, but I decided not to stop. You don't play hero on a narrow 2-lane with a 48-foot reefer in tow and nowhere to pull off. Not out there. About a mile later, I saw a second person. This time a woman in her 20s wearing a red windbreaker and black leggings, standing right at the edge of the white line. I had to hold my lane firm because any drift would have clipped her, and there's no shoulder worth a damn on that stretch. I passed within maybe 6 feet of her, and our eyes met for a split second, her face completely blank, no expression at all, not even a blink. She didn't step back from the wind blast either. People always flinch. She just stood there like she'd been placed. I said out loud, "Nope," without meaning to, and tightened my grip on the wheel. 2 random people on a deserted forest road within 2 minutes of each other, neither asking for help. That's not a coincidence. My speed stayed steady. Too fast and you miss things, too slow and you become the thing. I flicked the high beams whenever the straightaway opened up and dropped them again just to scan deeper and keep my timing right. I checked my mirrors every few seconds, half expecting to see taillights pop on behind me. Nothing. The other half watching my trailer sway in case of a flat or a blowout I'd somehow missed. Also, nothing. Maybe 300 yards further, my headlights caught a third figure. This one lying across the road on his back, arms spread out. I hit the brakes hard, my Freightliner's tires squealing, the whole rig shuddering as I stopped about 15 feet away. Everything in the cab shifted forward. Logbook slid, sandwich wrapper crinkled, the drink bottle knocked into the cup holder with a plastic thunk. I set the parking brake out of habit because you don't trust a half stop on a grade you can't see. In the wash of my low beams, I could see him plain. A man in jeans and a gray t-shirt, not moving, sprawled right in the middle of both lanes. His arms were out like a cross, feet angled weird, but not injury weird, more like he'd laid himself down and didn't care how it looked. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and made myself breathe steady. I scanned the area. Left ditch, right ditch, tree line, shoulder posts, the black beyond the guardrail breaks. There were no car parts, no broken glass, no blood, no debris. The way he was positioned didn't look like he'd been hit by a vehicle. It looked staged. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. And I hate even saying that because it sounds dramatic, but that's exactly what it felt like. This hard thud under the seatbelt while the low beams washed over his shirt. Part of me wanted to set the brakes and go check a pulse like you're supposed to do, like basic human decency. But the other part was screaming trap, like actually yelling in my head because those 2 I'd passed didn't move, didn't flinch, and there was no wreck, no skid marks, nothing that said accident. It felt arranged, and if it's arranged, then there are more pieces you can't see. I scanned the tree line, the guardrail gaps, the ditch angles, anything that could hide a person. I told myself 30 seconds, just 30 seconds to look, and I counted slow. 10, 15, while watching his chest for movement and my mirrors for anything behind me. Nothing. The road was dead quiet, no engine noise except my reefer ticking and the fan cycling. On 30, I put the truck back in gear and eased off the brake. I signaled left even though no one was there. Habit. Nosed into the oncoming lane and crept forward at maybe 5 miles an hour, lining my bumper so the steer tire wouldn't clip his foot. As I drew level, close enough to see the tiny logo on his shirt, his hand twitched. Just a finger flex, like a test. And I said nope out loud and mashed the throttle. The hood lifted, the transmission caught, and in the mirror, I saw him jackknife up, then stand in one smooth movement, like he hadn't been hurt at all, turning to watch my trailer as I accelerated away. I pushed the Freightliner up to 75, which is stupid on those narrow roads with barely any shoulder and blind rises. But I didn't care about perfect driving then. I cared about distance. The rig long-hauled straight, engine roaring, and I held center so no one could jump out from the edge and catch me swerving. I waited for headlights to pop on behind me, waited for some old Crown Vic or pickup to appear out of nowhere and lock on, but the mirrors were clean except for my own lights bouncing. The CB threw static. I thought about keying up for a brake check and decided against it because if they had a radio too, I didn't want to tell them I was spooked. Every reflector post ahead got treated like a person until the beam proved it wasn't. I drove the next 50 miles without slowing down once, white-knuckling the wheel so hard my fingers hurt, phone in my lap with 911 typed and ready so I just had to hit the green button with my thumb if anything moved. I ticked off mile markers, did math without meaning to. If I hold 70, I clear this stretch in 40-something minutes, and kept my eyes moving. Left mirror, road, right mirror, gauges, repeat. A green sign finally gave me Pineville 12, and I clung to that number like a finish line. When the first sodium lights showed up over the trees, I felt my shoulders drop enough to breathe right. I took the turn into town, rolled past a closed feed store, and spotted a bright McDonald's with a lot lit like a stadium. I swung wide, parked with my nose toward the street for a straight shot out, kept the engine idling, and sat there shaking for about 10 minutes, just watching the two entrances and anyone who pulled in. No one did. I didn't call the police, and I know someone's gonna say I should've, but honestly, what was I going to report? 3 people were just standing in the dark and one laid down in the road like a possum. I pictured getting stuck there for 2 hours, answering questions while my load temp creeped up, and my delivery window evaporated, and my dispatcher blew up my phone about the route choice. Yes, we all know it's faster, and yes, it's a bad idea at night. But I know what I saw, and I know what they were setting up. Get me to stop on a blind, get me out of the cab where I'm slow and high off the ground, and then what? Yank me down, jump the steps, grab the keys, cut the glad hands, whatever. That trailer had about 90 grand of seafood behind me, plus my wallet and the truck itself, which is enough motive for anyone who doesn't mind hurting people to make rent. I take the interstate now, even if it adds an hour and a half and chews more fuel, and when I see someone on the side in a remote stretch, I hit the hazard flashers long enough to drop a pin and call highway patrol with mile marker and direction and let them sort it. But I don't stop. Not for anything that looks staged. Not for anything I can't confirm from the cab. Let the cops figure out who needs real help and who's setting up the next driver. I've been driving refrigerated trucks on I-5 between Portland and Seattle for 10 years now, hauling electronics for Amazon and Best Buy distribution centers. In March 2018, I was making a routine run with a trailer full of laptops, leaving Portland around 2 a.m. The weather was absolute garbage, heavy rain and fog so thick I could barely see 50 feet ahead. Around 3 a.m. passing through Castle Rock, I spotted a car pulled over on the shoulder with its hazards flashing. White Nissan sedan, hood up, and a woman in a light-colored jacket waving her arms frantically. I started to slow down because that's what you do when someone needs help. But something made me hesitate. The woman looked too put together for someone stranded in this weather. Her hair was dry, her jacket was clean, and she wasn't huddled against the rain like you'd expect. She was just standing there in the downpour, waving mechanically. I edged onto the shoulder with my 4-ways on and kept it at a crawl, every instinct split between help and don't be dumb. My cab lights caught the inside of the Nissan, back seat piled with clothes, a gym bag, maybe a blanket rolled tight like it was packed, not tossed. No movement behind the fogged glass. She stepped closer to my door, and I saw a phone in her hand, but the screen stayed dark. Something about the way she held it, screen down, not checking bars, bugged me. Why wouldn't you be calling, even pretending? The shoulder was narrow, my trailer straddling rumble strips. I cracked my window and yelled I'd call it in. She didn't answer. No thank you, no please. She pointed at the hood, then pointed at me, then curled her hand in that come here motion, over and over, like a loop. No sound, just rain hammering the mirror and her face blank like she'd practiced it in a mirror. The smell of wet brakes drifted up, and I pictured how stupid I'd look on the news if this was a staged thing, and guys were crouched out of sight, waiting on a door pop. The back seat clutter wasn't clutter. It looked like blocking, like a deliberate pile to hide the footwell. I slid the window up, eased off the brake, and rolled. In the mirror, she didn't chase or wave harder. She just stood there, hazards strobing across her jacket until my taillights faded. A minute later, I punched in Washington State Patrol, but the call hissed and died twice. That stretch is patchy. I decided I'd report it at the next open stop. The interstate ahead was just ghost lanes and spray. I kept it steady, telling myself I'd done the right thing, replaying the clean jacket, the dry hair, the phone face down. Why was her hair dry? About 20 miles down the road, my cargo monitoring system beeped. The temperature in the trailer had risen 3 degrees. Not a huge swing, but for electronics, it's a red flag, and the unit should have been steady. I scanned for a safe pull-off and saw a closed diner with a wide gravel lot and a dead neon sign. It was dark, one streetlight, and my rig looked giant and alone. I parked nose out and killed my headlights, left the markers on. Standard check. If that reefer hiccuped in this weather and I didn't log it, I'd eat it later. I grabbed my flashlight and a tire iron from the toolbox because I'm not walking blind behind a loaded box at 3:30 in the morning, not after Castle Rock. The rain had thinned to a thick mist that made the beam look short. The reefer display showed a fault, then cleared itself, which is honestly worse. I listened. Fans, drip, my own boots. Then a tiny sound from inside. A scrape, like metal kissing metal, and then stopping, not fans. I froze, then told myself it could be a pallet pin shifting. But that beep and the scrape together? No. I slid the right door latch and eased it up because you don't fling a door on a load worth 6 figures. The smell inside was cold and cardboard. My light tracked along shrink wrap, labels, pallet corners. Halfway in, the neat wall of laptop cartons wasn't neat anymore. Someone had shoved a column just enough to open a skinny path, angles wrong like teeth knocked out. I felt that stupid hot-cold wave start in my neck. I hate that, and lifted the tire iron higher. Another scrape, deeper, like someone trying not to make a scrape. "Hey," I said, loud, flat, not angry. You learned that tone. "This is a refrigerated unit. I'm calling the cops." I stepped up onto the bumper to get height, aiming the beam across the opened seam of boxes. Tape slicked with condensation flashed back. The path ran toward the nose, where the bulkhead curves. Something shifted by the back wall, not big, just enough to catch the beam, then disappear. "Don't move," I said, louder. "I'm armed." I wasn't, not in the way that mattered, but a tire iron is still metal. I climbed into the trailer, boots crunching on a torn plastic strap. The cold bit through my jeans now that I'd opened it up. I swept the light to the bulkhead, and the beam landed on a man. He was pressed into the corner by the return vent, clothes ripped, face drawn tight like he hadn't slept. Dirt under his nails, a split on his knuckle, eyes wild but not mean, more animal than attacker. He flinched at the light, brought one hand up slow, then both. Don't hit me," he croaked, barely there. "I won't hurt you." He slid sideways into the light, palms high, and for half a second I thought knife. But his hands were empty, fingers splayed, shaking. I kept the iron up anyway, set my feet where I could bail backward if he rushed. He swallowed and tried again, voice sandpaper. He said someone had locked him in there against his will. He said his name was Kevin, that 2 guys had jumped him in a Portland truck stop parking lot and shoved him into a trailer while it was parked. He thought he was going to freeze to death or suffocate. I was in complete shock. I specifically remembered checking my seal before leaving, and it had been intact. But now the seal was dangling broken, like someone had snipped it with bolt cutters while I was driving. Kevin looked genuinely scared, but I couldn't tell if he was a victim or part of some kind of setup. I told him to climb down and sit on the curb where I could see him, and I stayed by my steps with the tire iron and called 911. The operator said a patrol unit would be there in 15 minutes. I kept distance, watching him shiver and hold his head, and watching the highway for any car that slowed like it might turn in. He climbed down slow, shoes sliding on the wet bumper, palms out like he knew how this looked. "I'm Kevin," he said again, voice scraping, and asked if I had water. I said it was in the cab, and I wasn't moving from where I was. He nodded and sat where I told him to sit, under the dead neon, hands in his sleeves. The reefer temp stabilized and the fault cleared, which didn't make me feel safer at all. I kept the flashlight on his hands, and on the far edge of the lot, the part facing the road. He didn't try to stand. He didn't try anything. He just sat hunched and kept glancing toward the highway like he was waiting for someone else to arrive. Now, before I go further, the seal. I use numbered cable seals. I photograph the tag in dock light. I check it again at fuel. If a seal shows up cut at delivery, I get written up, sometimes worse, so I don't skip it. The tag on my latch had been clipped clean, end square. That is not a bump from a forklift or a lazy dock tech. That is tools. Which means either someone reached my doors at a light or someone touched it before I rolled. Both options are ugly, and both make Kevin a problem I can't solve by being nice. Kevin told me he'd been grabbed at Jubit's by the fuel islands. 2 guys, hoodies, one asked for a light, he said. I woke up in the cold. He held out his wrists, red grooves and scabbed cuts, dirt under his nails like he'd scraped at something. He kept staring past me, like he was listening for a car to pull in. I told him State Patrol was coming and to stay still. He said okay and went quiet. Every minute stretched. I counted down from 15 twice and then stopped counting because it made me feel slow. 2 state troopers rolled in together, 1 male, 1 female. They swept the lot with their spots first, then parked nose out and made everything feel smaller. They split us. The woman took me by my bumper and asked for license, run sheet, when I left Portland, where I stopped, any tampering I noticed. I told her straight. The Castle Rock Nissan, the woman waving with dry hair and a dark phone, the cut seal, the scrape inside, the man in the corner by the bulkhead. She had me pin times down to 5-minute windows and wrote fast without looking up. The male trooper handled Kevin. I heard pieces. He gave his name and repeated the same story about getting jumped, zip ties, waking up in a box. He showed bruises on his forearms and the cuts on his hands. The trooper kept pressing his clock. When did they grab you? When did you wake? How long in the cold? And Kevin's answers drifted, like he was filling gaps. Not obviously lying, just foggy. The 2 troopers traded a look when he stumbled over an hour he couldn't place. When I brought up the woman on the shoulder, the female trooper frowned. She said there had been 3 similar reports in the past month up and down I-5, staged breakdowns, decoys flagging trucks, and 2 drivers later found pallets light, and a 3rd driver got robbed at gunpoint in his own cab after cracking the door for a hurt guy. Same corridor, she said. Castle Rock to Kelso after midnight. It didn't make me feel better that I hadn't stopped. It made it feel like pieces of the same plan. They photographed the cut seal ends, the shifted cartons, the reefer fault code on my display. They checked Kevin's ID. It scanned. No warrants. The male trooper said they were taking him to the station for an ID check and prints because of the commercial theft angle. If he's clean, shelter, he told me. If he's not, case number and a detective will call. They watched me thread a new seal from my spares, log the number over radio, and stood by while I called dispatch to note the delay in the change. They loaded Kevin into the back of the cruiser. He looked at me through the glass and mouthed something I couldn't catch. Maybe, sorry. Maybe nothing. When they pulled out, the lot went dead again. I put it in gear and finished the drive to Seattle in silence. No radio, just the engine and a buzz in my head I couldn't shake off. I never found out if Kevin was a victim or part of the crew. The police promised to follow up, but nothing ever came. And I didn't push because I haul freight. I'm not a detective, and sometimes not knowing keeps you moving. People ask if I feel guilty about not stopping for that woman, and I don't have a neat answer. What I do know is, I don't stop for anyone on that stretch of I-5 anymore. Not for hazards, not for good hair, not for anything. I call it in and keep rolling. Maybe that makes me cold, but I resealed my doors, delivered the load, and went home, and... "3 years ago, during my sophomore year, the starter in my Honda Civic died right in the dorm parking lot. I went to school in Michigan at a tiny university where our dorm was a chopped-up old house. 2 parking spots out front, a chain across the back drive, doors that only latched if you yanked them. The nearest repair shop was 30 miles away, so I found a towing company on Google. The dispatcher said an hour. I decided to ride along so I could ask the mechanics about a rental, 'cause missing labs would wreck my week. A guy in his mid-30s rolled up in a faded Ford tow truck. Danny, wrinkled t-shirt, scuffed jeans, cap with a gas logo. While he was loading my car, he talked non-stop about weather and gas prices like I was background noise, which was fine. Once we got on the highway, though, he switched to his ex-wife, how she left him, took the kids, cleaned out their bank account, and he got specific, like who said what and how the judge was rigged. I gave the bare minimum, that's rough, sorry, and stared at mile markers. At the shop, I learned it'd be at least 2 days, and rentals were booked, graduation week. I was doing the math on classes and work study when Danny stepped back in with, "I'll run you home." I figured it was part of the job and said thanks. On the return, he got nosy. Where I lived, which building, which floor, did I have a boyfriend, what I did on weekends. I kept it vague. North side, third, roommate, mostly study. And he laughed like we were sharing a joke and said I seemed nice, not like most girls. When we pulled up, I unbuckled before the truck stopped, said thanks, and went straight in. Yanked the swollen door until it caught. I thought that was the end of it. That evening I got a text. "Hey Emily, it's Danny. Want to grab dinner this weekend?" My stomach dropped because I hadn't given him my number. I deleted it and told myself maybe the tow form had a contact field. Dumb admin stuff. Next morning an unknown number called. Then another in the afternoon. Then again that night. I didn't answer. The messages kept coming. "Don't ignore me. You're so sweet. Let's just talk." I blocked, then blocked again when a new number popped up. By day 2, my phone was buzzing in class every couple hours. I told my roommate Jenna and showed her the texts. She said, "Talk to the RA." The RA door was locked. Handwritten signs said, "Back at 6." It was 5:20. I went upstairs and cracked our curtain to see if any spots had opened up. That's when I saw the tow truck across the street. Engine off, parked nose out so the cab faced our door. Danny was inside, cap low, elbow on the window, not on his phone, just sitting and looking at our building. I took a photo through the screen, then another. Jenna asked, "Is that him?" I nodded. Campus security at our school was basically one guy with a radio, and I wasn't confident he'd even be on shift yet, so I called the towing company instead. A man answered with road noise in the background. I said my name, the date of the tow, my car model, the shop. Your driver Danny has been calling and texting me from different numbers, and he's parked outside our women's dorm right now. He cut me off with, "Danny's a good guy. Maybe he just likes you. Girls always make everything so dramatic." I kept my voice flat. I didn't give him my number. He got it somewhere he shouldn't have. He's sitting outside our building. The man said he couldn't control where drivers ate lunch. He said maybe I'd sent mixed signals. You rode along. I said I rode along because the shop was 30 miles away and I needed to talk rentals, that's it. He said, "So what do you want me to do? Fire a guy for asking you out?" I looked back out the window and Danny lifted his head like he felt me looking. Jenna whispered, "What's he saying?" I shook my head and pressed the phone tighter to my ear. I told the owner, "I want you to tell him to stop contacting me and to leave this address alone." He gave this little scoff that I could hear even over the road noise. "Parking on a public street isn't a crime," he said. I said, "Neither is me filing a report." He breathed like I'd just ruined his night and started to argue about how girls these days escalate everything over nothing. I didn't escalate. I spelled it out. He used customer info to contact me outside the job. He showed up at my dorm without being invited. He's calling from different phones. If this doesn't stop immediately, I'm going to the school and the police. The owner said I was overreacting, that Danny was lonely, that maybe I liked the attention and was doing a bit. I felt my hands start to shake, so I gripped the sill and made myself speak slower. "This is harassment," I said. "If it continues, it's going to be a police matter." He said, "Do what you gotta do," like he was daring me. I watched the cab across the street. Danny didn't move. I told the owner I had screenshots and a photo of the truck. He exhaled, long and loud, like I'd ruined his weekend plans, and I barely held back a scream and said I'd file a police report for harassment if he didn't stop his driver. Only then did his tone change, like a switch flipped, and he said he'd talk to Danny, said he didn't want problems, said he'd straighten it out. I hung up and set my phone face down on the desk and waited. 15 minutes, half an hour, nothing. The next morning there was one more call I didn't pick up, then a final text. "My bad." After that, silence for the rest of the day. I told Jenna he'd backed off, for now, and she said to keep every screenshot anyway, and to text her if I saw the truck again. I did both. For the next week I kept seeing the tow truck even though the messages stopped. First time was outside the convenience store next to our block, hood up, like he was checking something under it, but he wasn't touching anything, just standing there watching people go in and out. Second time he rolled slow past the north lot while we were cutting across the sidewalk. Jenna reached for my elbow and we ducked into the library like we'd been headed there anyway. Third time was late afternoon, angled in across from the bus stop, and when a bus blocked my view and pulled away, the truck was gone. I stopped going anywhere alone after 5. If I had late lab, I waited in the building until Jenna could walk me back. If I had to grab groceries, I asked a classmate to meet me at the door. I told 2 TAs I was dealing with a car guy issue, and they let me sit near the exit and keep my phone on vibrate in labs. I started carrying my keys laced between my fingers even inside the stairwell. Stupid, I know, but it made me move faster. By the end of the week, he stopped showing up, at least where I could see, and the routine I'd built stayed anyway. The fear didn't go anywhere. It just changed shape. Anytime a number I didn't recognize flashed on my screen, my chest tightened and my thumb hovered over decline. Sometimes I answered and hung up if there was dead air. Sometimes I let it ring and then stared at the missed call like it could crawl out of the log. I stopped giving my full name on order forms unless I had to. If a delivery needed a phone number, I used the campus office line and then emailed to confirm, which annoyed people but felt safer. I haven't ridden in a tow truck since. If my car needs work now, I text a friend with a car and ask them to follow me to the service center and wait while I hand over the keys, So there's always another person who knows where I am and who I spoke to. Every couple months, usually stupid late when I can't sleep because exams are stacking up or because a siren went by too slow, I'll Google Danny's name with the town and the company to see if anything pops. Arrests, restraining orders, anything that says it wasn't just me. And I'll click a few pages deep just in case. I never find anything, and it doesn't make me feel better. It just confirms this thing I didn't want to learn. Any service that touches your name and number and address can tilt into danger if one person decides the rules don't apply to you. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. So now I treat every clipboard and what's a good callback? Like I'm handing over a spare key. My trust is cracked and I don't think it's gonna mend all the way. And what keeps me up sometimes is thinking about the other women who called that same company from grocery lots and dorms and back roads, and who maybe got the same fake charm ride and the same parked truck, and whether anyone else got brushed off when they complained, because I did report it to campus security later, and the guy behind the desk nodded a lot and said, since he didn't physically come inside or do it on campus property, there wasn't much they could do beyond note it, which is nothing. And looking back, I wish I'd gone straight to the police instead of trying to handle it with the company. A report is a record. A record helps the next person. But I was 19 and scared and trying to be small and not make it worse, and I didn't know the steps, and now I'm older and maybe clearer on what I'd do. But the fear sticks anyway, and every time my phone lights up with an unknown number, my heart still skips, and I watch it ring. I've been driving trucks for about 8 years now, and this happened in early October when I was hauling a Kenworth T680 on Route 10 through Texas, going from Houston to El Paso with a load of construction materials. By midnight, I was past San Antonio. My eyes were closing, and I knew I couldn't make it to the next major truck stop. I pulled into a small roadside rest area near a town with a population of 300. There was space for just 2 trucks. One was already there, plus a parking lot for 6 cars with 3 spots taken. On the grounds, there was a 24-hour bathroom with a shower for $2 and a food trailer selling burritos and coffee through a window. I parked, grabbed a change of shirt and a towel, took a shower, bought a chicken burrito and a Coke, ate right behind the wheel. By 1 a.m., I was already lying on the cot in my sleeper berth and falling asleep to the hum of occasional passing cars. I don't love sleeping at tiny pull-offs like that, but I was at the point where your chin hits your chest and you jolt awake pretending it didn't. So yeah, a nap there beat drifting a lane. Before I crashed, I noticed the other rig had shut down. Older Peterbilt, dented rear door, one strap hanging loose. You clock those things without thinking. The food guy barely looked at me when I paid, and the bathroom push-button lock stuck a second, which I filed away in that dumb mental list you keep on the road. I set my keys on the little shelf by the bunk, sneakers by the steps, jacket hanging where I could grab it. Nothing felt wrong, just road routine, and I was out quick. Woke up sharply at 3:27 a.m. with a full bladder. I'd downed too much Coke. Didn't want to go out into the cold, but there wasn't a choice. I pulled a jacket over my t-shirt, shoved my feet into my sneakers without tying the laces, climbed out of the cab. The air was freezing and damp, the lights throwing a yellow glow across the asphalt, carving these hard shadows that made everything look flatter than it was. In the bathroom, I washed my face with cold water, trying to wake up, and the door creaked. Someone walked in behind me. That seemed off, because when I'd crossed the lot, I hadn't seen anyone. I dried my face with a paper towel, tossed it, stepped back outside, and headed toward my truck. I was maybe 10 meters from the cab when I saw a silhouette near my door. Tall and thin, black hoodie, strings of dirty blonde hair sticking out. I slowed because he wasn't moving along. He was planted at my handle like he'd been thinking about trying it. The other truck sat dark and quiet. Food window shuttered. and the car lot looked lighter by one space. 2 cars now, not 3. I thought about swinging wide and climbing in on the passenger side, but there was a shallow drainage dip there and loose gravel, and I didn't feel like eating asphalt if he decided to rush me while my laces flopped. I kept my hands visible, keys pinched in the left, and said, "How's it going, man?" Nothing. I added, "You need something?" He shifted just enough to keep his shoulder between me and the step. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand why I didn't yell or try to shoulder past him. Company policy is simple: no fights, no weapons, no drama. And I've watched drivers lose routes over being a hero for 10 seconds. Plus, people at 3 in the morning aren't the same as people at 3 in the afternoon. Desperate does dumb, and desperate at a quiet rest area is how you end up in the news. So I kept my voice flat and calm, stopped out of arm's reach, and let him see my hands. I was already mapping dumb plans. Drop the keys and back up, cut right toward the bathrooms if he lunged, or circle the hood if he drifted left. Nothing fancy. Just don't get pinned against the step. His jeans hung loose on him. His right sneaker was untied with the lace dragging on the ground. I couldn't see his face clearly. The light was behind him, shadowing his features. But I could tell he was young, maybe 25 to 30. I tried to walk around him on the left to get to the door, but he shifted, blocking my path. I said, "Excuse me, I need to get through." But he didn't answer, just narrowed his eyes. Then his right hand darted to the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a folding knife with a black handle. The blade clicked open, reflecting the light. He jabbed the knife in my direction without getting close and said, "Wallet. Now." His voice was hoarse, nervous, like he was scared of what he was doing himself. I slowly reached into my back pocket, pulled out my worn brown wallet and held it out to him. He snatched it from my hands, opened it with one hand while holding the knife in the other, and pulled out the bills. 3 20s and a $5, $65 total. Asked, "That's all?" I nodded. He threw the empty wallet on the asphalt and it skidded under the step. Then he stuck his hand in my left pocket, felt my phone and pulled it out, an old Samsung Galaxy with a cracked screen. Told me to unlock it. I entered the code, and then I suddenly stepped back and ran for the cab. He yelled something and came after me, but I was faster. I hit the handle, jumped in, slammed and locked both doors. He hit the window with his fist, then scraped the knife across it, leaving a thin white line. He kept cussing, saying to open up, but I was already digging in the glove box for the backup phone and dialing 911. I slid the shifter into neutral so the brake lights wouldn't flare and kept my foot off everything, just watching him pace and bang the glass like he wanted to convince himself it would give. The dispatcher answered after 2 rings, calm and quick, and I explained the situation, gave the rest area name, the mile marker I'd clocked, and that there were 2 truck slots and a bathroom. She told me to stay in the cab, keep the doors locked, turn the dome light on if I could safely, and not engage. I glanced out the window. The man was gone. Not a single car in the parking lot had left. The second truck was still parked dark. I told her he'd moved out of view. She asked for his height, clothes, the knife description, any tattoos. I gave what I had. She said units were en route and to keep talking unless it put me at risk. I kept scanning mirrors. Drivers, convex, hood mirrors. Nothing but the bathroom block and the shrubs behind it. I tapped the air horn one quick time just to make noise, in case he was tucked along the fairing. Nothing moved. The dispatcher said help was close. I cracked the curtain to the sleeper just enough to reach a flashlight, clicked it on and off twice so they could ID my cab, then set it down. The knife mark on the glass looked like a ghost line from the inside, and I kept thinking whether he'd circle to the passenger side. But that slope was loose gravel, and I knew he'd make noise if he tried it. A cruiser rolled in about 8 minutes later, lights low, no siren. Two deputies stepped out with flashlights up, sweeping the lot with tight angles like they'd done this 1,000 times. One tapped my step with the end of his light and said through the glass, "Stay put. We got it." I nodded and stayed on the phone. They moved around the bathroom, along the food trailer skirting, checked under my rear, then fanned toward the ditch line that ran along the frontage. I could hear gravel crack under their boots and a radio chirp, then nothing for a stretch that felt longer than it was. About 40 minutes later, they came back with the guy in cuffs, hoodie pushed back, hair pasted to his forehead, mud on his knee where that untied lace dragged. They said they'd found him in a drainage ditch about 100 meters down, trying to wedge under the small concrete bridge. He wouldn't look at me, kept asking one deputy if he could get his phone back, which made no sense because the phone he had was mine. They bagged the knife, bagged my phone, took pictures of the scrape on my window and the spot where my wallet had landed, then had me step down and give a quick statement while the other deputy watched the lot. The older Peterbilt stayed dark the whole time. Nobody ever came out. By the time we wrapped, it was a little after 4. They told me I could try to sleep there a while or roll when I felt steady, and that a detective might call me later that day. I climbed back in and tried to rest, but every hiss from the air system sounded like a shoe on asphalt, so I set a timer and just lay there until the sky went gray. When the sun pushed up over the road, I did a fast walk around, tires, latches, seals, then fired the Kenworth and pulled back onto the highway toward El Paso. They never explained how he ended up there without a car, or why robbing a trucker at 3 in the morning in a place that empty seemed like a plan, and I never heard what happened to him after that night. I just kept driving, paid to polish out the window, and, dumb as it sounds, I moved the backup phone to the center console so I wouldn't be fishing the glove box if someone ever tried me like that again. I've been running tractors and combines from Minneapolis out to Montana every couple weeks for the past 4 years, so I know this route like the back of my hand. It's mostly straight shots through the flat parts of South Dakota. Hardly any traffic, just wind-pushing tumbleweeds across the asphalt. About 8 hours in, right at the halfway point, I always stopped overnight at this big truck stop between Pierre and Highmore. Decent place with fuel, showers, a diner, and a guarded lot where you could sleep without worrying. Usually 5 or 6 other truckers there on any given night. This particular run I left Minneapolis around 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, hauling a John Deere on a lowboy. Figured I'd hit my usual stop around midnight. Weather was perfect. The engine was purring. The load was strapped down solid. Everything going smooth. I kept it at 62. Let the crews do the work. Watch the mile markers click by. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how routine makes you lazy. When you run the same line long enough, you stop double-checking things like backup stops or where the late-night tow outfits are. You just count on the same places being open, the same guy at the fuel desk grumbling about coffee. I had the radio low, a thermos of black on the floor, and that empty country quiet that makes you think you're the only person left on the road. I pulled up to the truck stop around 12:30 a.m. and immediately knew something was off. The whole building was boarded up with plywood, windows spray-painted black, a rusty padlock on the doors. The fuel pumps had been ripped out. You could see the cut pipes sticking up through cracked concrete islands overgrown with weeds. Every light pole in the lot was dark. Either the bulbs were smashed or the power was cut. The parking area was empty except for a stripped pickup truck with no wheels sitting way in the back corner. I did a slow loop around the property. Nobody there, not a soul. The place had obviously been shut down for months, maybe a year. It didn't make sense. They had a guard and cameras, but I wasn't going to sit there and try to solve it. I rolled to a stop where the diesel lanes used to be and just stared at the boarded doors, thinking about the diner waitress who used to call everyone Han, the night manager with the keys on his belt, the lot guy who'd point you to a spot near the fence, gone like they were never there. I checked my phone out of habit. 1 bar. Useless. Problem was, the next proper truck stop was another hour down the road, and I'd already been driving for 9 hours straight. My eyes were starting to close on their own. I told myself I'd push on to the next place and sleep there. Quick math in my head. 60 miles, give or take. Figured I could muscle through. I could have stayed there in the abandoned lot, but something about it felt wrong. So I got back on the highway and pushed on. Big mistake, because within 10 minutes I was literally nodding off, my head dipping forward then snapping back up. I know better. Fatigue is what kills guys out here. But I kept telling myself just a little farther. At mile marker 183, I gave up and pulled onto the gravel shoulder, killed the engine, locked the doors. I looked around. Nothing but flat fields in every direction. Not a house or tree in sight. Just scrub brush and darkness. I left my markers off so I didn't look like a billboard. Pushed my cap down over my eyes and tilted the seat back, figuring I'd catch a couple hours of sleep. I cracked the window 2 fingers for air, tucked the key lanyard under the dash so it wouldn't rattle. Little things you do so noises don't drive you crazy. But I couldn't relax. My mind kept circling back to that abandoned truck stop and how weird it was. Who rips out pumps and spray paints the glass and walks away from a guarded lot like that? I told myself I was being dumb and tried box breathing. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Anything to shut it down. Trucks weren't coming by. It was dead. No bugs thumping the windshield, just that big, empty quiet. I lay there for maybe 20 minutes, eyes closed but wide awake, when I heard a sound behind the trailer, the squeak of old brakes. I froze and listened hard. There was an engine idling back there, rough and uneven, not a diesel knock. Gas, like a half-worn pickup with a bad muffler. I eased the window shade down with 2 fingers and slid my eyes to the passenger mirror. Dark-colored Dodge Ram sat about 50 feet back at an angle, lights off, no reflective door decals, no light bar, definitely not highway patrol. It didn't pull in front of me, didn't go around, just sat there breathing. I watched maybe 3 seconds tops, and then a door slammed, hard, and a voice barked, "Hey!" Not friendly, not checking wellness, more like a command. Every instinct lit up. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong guy. I reached for the key, twisted, and my Mac gave me that slow, ugly whine, starter grinding like it was chewing gravel. 2 seconds, maybe less, but it felt like the whole night hung on it. And in that gap I heard feet on gravel, fast, closing the distance on my blind side. I shoved my shoulder against the door to make sure the locks were set. Free hand on the shifter, thumb punched the trailer brake knob in case I had to leave the lowboy there. Not ideal, but better than getting dragged out. The engine caught with a cough and I slammed it into drive, heel down, hands moving by habit, air brake released, service brake feathered, steady pressure on the throttle, 'cause spinning out on the shoulder is how you stall, and then you're done. Gravel pinged the undercarriage, and I felt the whole rig hesitate as the trailer weight tugged, but the nose rolled and I told myself, do not look back, keep it straight, get back onto asphalt and go. Right as I started moving, the passenger handle snapped loud in the door, like someone trying to rip a cabinet off a wall. Then again, harder, metal flex you can feel through your elbow. These rigs don't leap, they commit. And while I was building speed, the guy got a boot on the running board and latched onto the handle. I caught a slice of his face in the glass. Late 40s, patchy gray through the beard, eyes blown wide, hood up, no mask, nothing to hide who he was, which made my stomach drop more than if he'd covered up. He pounded the window with the meat of his fist, and his mouth kept moving, yelling. Couldn't make words over the engine and the gravel, just raw sound. "Get off!" I yelled, stupid I know, and put more foot into it, jerked the wheel left then centered, nosed onto the lane, mirrors dancing. The Ram stayed dead in the dark behind us. No headlights, no movement, like it was just a prop to stage the rush. The guy shifted his weight and started kicking at the glass. Heel first, short chopping kicks like he'd done this before. 20, 30, 40, the wind bite turning the kick into a whack-whack rhythm. And then the safety glass crazed in a fast spiderweb and let go. Tiny cubes dumping across my lap and floor mat. Instinct yanked my hands and I jerked the wheel right, hard enough to make the lowboy tug me back. The running board bounced and suddenly there was no weight on the door. I checked the mirror, one glance, quick, and saw him roll, shoulder then back, then legs, and then he stopped. I didn't see him get up. The Ram on the shoulder stayed dead. No flash, no chase, just a dark box in darker country. I kept pressure on the pedal, held 45 until the grate opened and then 55, eyes jumping between glass, gauges, and the black ribbon ahead. I didn't lift until Chamberlain's glow showed, that soft smear you get before signage, and I took the first exit, rolled into the Loves because it was lit and had people moving around inside and cameras pointing real directions. I parked nose out under the canopy, killed the engine, hands shaking more from adrenaline wear-off than fear, and dialed 911. I told the dispatcher mile marker, direction of travel, dark Ram, broken passenger window, possible injured male on the shoulder. She said units were tied up but someone would check. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. Inside lights, other trucks nearby. I gave my plate, carrier, load description, my cell. Cops showed about 30 minutes later, local and a trooper, and they took statements, went out, and came back saying they didn't find anyone or anything besides a field of my glass across the fog line. No Ram, no footprints they could track in gravel. One of them said, casual like he'd said it before. There'd been reports of people working that stretch, waiting for a tired driver on the shoulder, rushing the cab for a fast grab, sometimes two vehicles. He pointed at my broken window and said, if he got his arm in while you were still building speed, he'd have your locks in a second. I pictured that. Hand through, flick, door open, and swallowed. I get that people think they'll out-stubborn fatigue, but I don't mess with it now. I don't sleep on the shoulder, period. I'll run fumes or pull into a ramp with other rigs and lights, or just keep moving and call in for a safety stop. 'Cause that night showed me how fast routine turns into a bad situation, and if your gut says move, you move before someone else decides for you. Tyler Johnson had been hauling frozen goods from Denver to Salt Lake City since 2005, following the same Interstate 70 route through the Colorado Rockies dozens of times a year. He told his daughter that he could drive that stretch in his sleep, that he knew which exits had decent coffee and which turnouts the troopers liked. But in late June 2009, a rock slide pushed him onto State Highway 9, and that's where the routine ended. He didn't like that road. Too narrow. Too many blind corners. Long climbs where a loaded rig hated you. Yet he took it because the clock and the freezer temp didn't care how he felt. Near midnight, easing up toward Hoosier Pass, his Peterbilt started to lag in that way where your foot's down and nothing's happening. Turbo's going, he muttered, watching the boost gauge sag, and he downshifted twice just to keep momentum. He barely made a small gravel pull-off, 2 truck lengths, a bent reflector post, the rest just tree line, before the engine coughed, shuddered, and died. He tried the starter. Dead. He checked his phone. No bars, not even a ghost of one. He told his daughter he sat there with the dome light off and the keys out, listening to the ticking metal, doing the math on tow fees and schedules, and decided on the only logical move. Waited out till dawn and flagged down whoever came first, Ranger or trucker. Didn't matter. Just someone with a radio. He climbed into the sleeper and tried to drift. Boots on, jacket under his head. Because you don't strip down when you're stuck on a mountain, but sleep came in short jolts. Around 2 a.m., something woke him that wasn't wind or a passing car. There weren't any. More like a low mechanical hum that didn't belong to diesel. It wasn't high like a drone, and it wasn't choppy like rotors. It sat there in the air, steady, boring into him. He slid forward and cracked the driver's window, breath fogging the glass. And that's when the light punched through the trees above the road. Brilliant white, not floodlight fuzzy, more like a clean blade. It hung there maybe 100 yards up the slope, fixed, pointed downward at an angle, and the beam didn't sweep like a search party. It just sat. He stared and thought helicopter, then thought no, because the sound was wrong and the light didn't move. He leaned out farther, hand on the mirror, and watched that perfect white for what he later timed as 5 minutes. He said it felt like longer. Then it snapped off like someone flipped a breaker. The hum cut with it. The silence after was heavy, and he stayed half out the window, counting heartbeats, waiting for any follow-up sound like boots or voices or an engine fading. Nothing. Just wind in the pines and the creak of his cooling truck. He pulled the window up, checked the door locks, habit, and sat there telling himself not to go blundering into dark timber with a mag light like an idiot, because that's how people get hurt. He forced himself back to the bunk, phone on his chest, even though it was useless, and stared at the ceiling till a smear of gray showed behind the curtains. At first light he rolled out, popped the hood, and gave the turbo a look he already knew the answer to. Oily soot at the clamp, play in the shaft, then shut it and glanced down at the gravel where his boots had just scuffed. He froze. There were prints in the wet mud that hadn't been there when he pulled in. Deep heel-to-toe impressions from a single pair of boots coming from the tree line toward his rig, and then back again. They looked big, maybe size 11 or 12, but that wasn't what bothered him. The spacing was off. Too long between steps, like whoever made them had an easy 3-foot stride and wasn't slipping, which on that sloppy shoulder was odd. He followed the line around the passenger side and stopped at the trailer's rear. The door sat a half-inch proud of the frame. The lock was snapped shut through the hasp, but the latch tongue hadn't seated. He told his daughter he always double-checked doors in Denver, always, because you don't play games with frozen freight, and he could see in his head the last tug he gave it at the dock. He worked the lock off and lifted the handle. The door rolled up with a stiff rattle of aluminum, and cold air washed his face along with the smell of cardboard and meat. Inside, the pallet rows should have been neat and tight. Instead, a few cases had been slid sideways and back, not toppled, just moved enough to make a clear space on the deck, maybe 3 by 4 feet, dead center near the threshold like someone had staged a work area. He stepped up, boots scraping frost, and crouched. The scuffs told a story. Drag marks from boxes, a shoe print pivot, then nothing. On the floor in that cleared patch were scraps of plastic wrap, torn from case corners, and a scatter of small metal bits that didn't belong to food packaging. 3 bolts, 2 washers, a short length of stripped copper wire twisted at one end. He picked a bolt up, rolled it in his fingers, and tapped it against the trailer floor. It rang bright. He thought about road junk, about something bouncing in when he opened, but the debris had that placed on purpose feel, centered like tools laid out quick. He checked the trailer walls for pry marks, checked the floor for a cut, and checked the refrigeration unit readout by habit. The temp held steady. He went back to the cleared space, eyed the way the boxes had been shifted, efficient, like by someone who knew how to make room without collapsing a stack, and then looked again at the parts in his palm. The parts looked new, not rusted or weathered. Tyler sat in the cab and watched the road wake in pieces, first a pale smear, then a cyclist. Then at 8 a.m. a green Jeep eased in behind his trailer, and a ranger stepped out with a radio on his shoulder. He asked if Tyler needed assistance. Tyler explained the turbo failure and the no signal problem. The ranger called a tow from Fairplay and said it might take a while. Then he asked if Tyler had seen anything unusual during the night, because there had been incidents up here lately. 2 trucks, he said, abandoned, trailers open, drivers missing for hours. He didn't dance around it. 2 months, 2 cases. Rigs left on the shoulder with cargo disturbed, not ransacked, more like precision work. Both drivers were found miles into timber, no injuries, no clear memory. One kept mentioning a bright light and a mechanical humming that wasn't diesel or helicopter. The ranger said locals suspected an organized theft ring using gear to disorient drivers. Maybe something with light or sound. Maybe gas. He wouldn't speculate. But they were working the passes and picking their moments when traffic thinned and nobody had radios. He asked Tyler to note anything off later. They walked the rig together. Tyler rolled the door higher, and the ranger stared at the cleared space and the slid boxes, wrote notes, asked what was hauled, asked about shortages. Tyler said counts seemed right, but he'd confirm at the dock. He did not mention the bolts, wire, or the footprints. He didn't know who repeated what, and he didn't want to be a name in some briefing if the crew had ears. The wrecker arrived, hooked the Peterbilt, dragged him to a small shop, swapped a rebuilt turbo, and got him running. He signed the invoice without argument. He finished the delivery late, explained the detour and the repair, and nobody asked for details beyond the temperature and the count. After that, he stopped taking night mountain passes. If dispatch pushed him toward dark, he pushed back or routed around. He parked under cameras when there were cameras. He added a second lock and started logging door checks like clockwork. No speeches, just adjustments that made sense. He kept the story small, light, cleared space, because the rest felt like inviting attention. He told almost no one. Work stayed work, miles and fuel. He slept lighter. Boots nearby always. 15 years later, summer 2024, he told the full story to his daughter Emily over dinner because she asked why he hated night driving. He went through it step by step. She listened and said, "Why didn't you report the metal parts or the footprints?" He said he was afraid, not of the ranger, but of whoever walked to a locked trailer at midnight with equipment and a plan. He didn't want his name in a file or a rumor. He showed her a blurry phone photo from that morning. The tracks were deep and spaced wrong. She looked, didn't argue, nodded. Emily opened her laptop and searched and found articles about unexplained truck disappearances and cargo tampering in Colorado between 2008 and 2010. None were solved. Some mentioned drivers waking far from their rigs with missing hours. A few described bright lights and a strange mechanical hum. Tyler doesn't know what happened on Hoosier Pass that night, and he won't pretend there's a clean answer, but he's certain somebody was exploiting those empty miles and they were practiced, and staying in the cab kept him off their list. He calls it luck, not bravery, and he leaves it there for now. Last summer, me, my girlfriend Casey, and our dog Marley were driving from Seattle to Austin, and after 6 hours behind the wheel, we decided to pull into a rest stop off Highway 93 in Nevada. It was around noon, hot as hell, and we needed to stretch our legs and let Marley do his business. Pulling into the parking lot, I saw 3 big semi-trucks lined up near the trucker area. There were no other cars, just our Honda and those rigs. Casey immediately headed for the restrooms while I stayed with Marley by the car, about to clip on his leash. Before I could, I heard someone yelling from the left side. Turning around, I saw a middle-aged man in the driver's seat of the nearest truck. His window was down and he was waving at me. He kept waving, big impatient circles, while the idling engine chewed up whatever he said into just vibration and air. Marley did that low huff he does when he's unsure, ears back, so I yelled, "What?" and tapped my ear. The guy shouted again, but it was still just mouth shapes. I tried "what" 3 more times, and each time he looked more irritated, like I was the problem for not hearing him. To actually make out a word, I moved off the driver's side of our Honda and left Marley sitting by the front tire. I walked maybe 30 feet toward the passenger side of his truck, staying out where I had space. "What do you need?" I called louder, hands up like, "Say it slow." He leaned across his seat, beard pressed to the wheel, and finally I heard him clear. "Listen, I lost my wallet here in the parking lot. Can you help me look for it? Might have fallen out when I got out." I paused. Engine running, guy glued to the seat, asking me to help from 30 feet away. It wasn't the words, it was the picture they made. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how we'd been doing this trip. Quick stops. One of us stays with the car, doors locked, dog on leash, no chit-chat. 'Cause 2 days earlier outside Boise, some dude stood too close behind Casey in a coffee line, and it stuck with both of us. So I'm already in that headspace. I glanced at the other 2 rigs. Curtains pulled, no movement. Vending machines by the bathroom buzzed, nobody there. The heat coming off his exhaust felt like standing behind a dryer. "Where'd you lose it?" I asked, because that seemed like the only reasonable question. The guy was big, baseball cap, dark sunglasses, thick beard hiding most of his face. He tapped the inside of the door with 2 fingers and said, "Right here, between the cab and the ground." Then without missing a beat, "Climb up, help me check under the seat. My back's killing me, can't bend down." He said it like we were already on the same team, like this was normal. His left hand stayed low and out of sight. If the wallet slid down between the cab and the ground, why did I need to be under his seat? I raised my voice over the diesel. "Can you step down? I'll check under the door." He shook his head and pasted on a strained smile, like I was inconveniencing him. "Come on, man. Just hop up and feel around. I can't bend like that." I looked at the step, scuffed metal, a shiny grab handle, and then at my own hand, leash still dangling, Marley watching me with that patient dog look. Casey wasn't back yet. The restroom shade sliced a thin, dark line across the concrete, but nobody walked through it. The other 2 trucks stayed dead. I crouched a little to check the ground by his steps. Gravel, a smashed soda can, a torn receipt fluttering, no wallet. "Don't see it," I said. I didn't get closer. He drummed his fingers on the window frame and kept his eyes on me behind those lenses. "I'm not getting in your truck," I said, plain, like I was reading it off a card. I angled my shoulders so I could see our Honda and his door at the same time. Marley gave a sharp whine. The guy's mouth tightened under the beard. He leaned farther out like he might grab the outside handle and swing the door. Without thinking, I took another step back, soles scraping the grit. My heart wasn't doing drama, it was doing math. Distance, angles, where Casey would come out from. Why would a trucker need help from a random guy who just pulled in? Why hadn't he gotten out to look himself? "Where'd you lose it?" I asked cautiously. "Right here, between the cab and the ground." He tapped the door from inside. "Climb up, help me check under the seat. My back's killing me, can't bend down." My internal alarm started blaring. Get into the cab with a strange trucker at a deserted rest stop? No way. "Sorry, I can't," I replied firmly and started backing toward my car. The man leaned out the window and raised his voice. "Come on, it'll take a minute." "What? You scared to help?" Adrenaline spiked. I felt my pulse quicken. "No, I gotta go," I said, and cut the distance fast, straight back to the Honda because I didn't like how his shoulders bunched when I told him no. Marley wagged his tail like this was some fun new game and hopped up when I opened the rear door. I guided him in, clipped the belt loop through his harness, and hit the lock button, twice, just to hear it. I held my phone to my ear and let the blank screen stare at me because there was barely a bar up here. But it didn't matter what he could or couldn't see. It mattered that he saw me not alone. Out of the corner of my eye, the truck lurched. A slow crawl angled across the painted arrows, and for a second I thought he'd park nose to nose, but he eased it to a stop about 60 feet away, killed the engine, and the sudden quiet felt worse. He stuck his head out the window and shouted, "You sure you won't help? Just 1 minute." Like we were in the middle of a favor I'd already agreed to. I spun around and yelled, "Get lost, or I'm calling the cops," and I shoved my thumb on the phone like I was punching 3 numbers. My hand shook enough that I almost dropped it. I glanced toward the restroom door, still empty, and mapped how long it would take Casey to cross that concrete if he decided to close the rest of the distance with his bumper. The truck sat there like an animal that hadn't decided yet. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe less. Then he fired it up hard, gears grinding, and swung wide back toward the on-ramp, kicking a low cloud of grit that pinged our doors and tasted like metal on my tongue. And then he was moving away. I watched until the trailer cleared the bend and the dust settled in weird sheets, and then Casey pushed the restroom door and saw me half behind the driver door and said, "What happened?" in that clipped voice she uses when she's trying not to make a scene. And I told her, fast and plain, about the wallet, the ask, the part where he wanted me to climb up, and her face went from confused to flat, just no expression, which on her means everything got real. We didn't argue about Marley's walk or the route or snacks. I just turned the key, checked the mirrors, and we rolled. And when we hit service again outside Ely, she kept one hand on the dash and used the other to search and then read stuff out loud. Posts, news blurbs, old forum threads about truckers or guys using trucks to lure people into cabs with some story. Sometimes it was a broken strap, sometimes a dropped phone, sometimes a kid's car seat, and sometimes they'd park across from exits to block sightlines. And some of the stories ended with people getting robbed, shoved, worse, and some of them were, "I got a bad feeling and left," and you'd never know which one you were in until you were already on the step. I replayed the exact phrasing he used. "Climb up, help me check under the seat." Not, "Can you look under the step?" Not, "Do you see anything on the ground?" And the way his left hand stayed low. And I tried to come up with a version where that was normal. Like maybe his back really was shot, or he had a medical thing, or he was just lazy. But if you actually lose your wallet in a parking lot, you get out and you look for it. That's just basic. You don't try to recruit a stranger to get inside your space where your door and their door aren't the same. And the thing that keeps catching on me isn't even the ask. It's the insistence, that push. Because normal people, when you say no at a deserted stop in the middle of the day, they wave you off and figure it out. They don't reposition a whole semi at you like they're making a point. Maybe it was nothing, and he drove off to his next load and laughed about some nervous kid with a dog. And maybe it wasn't nothing and I backed out of something I don't have to carry forever. But either way, I'm good with the choice. And if I ever drop my own wallet between the cab and the ground, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. I'll get out and look myself, not invite strangers into my vehicle. I've been working as a trucker for 11 years now, and in that time I've seen all kinds of stuff on the roads, from accidents to fights at gas stations, but that story in late April turned out to be the strangest. That day, I was hauling electronics from Phoenix to Las Vegas on Route 93. The temperature was approaching 100 degrees, the AC working at its limit. The last 2 days I'd barely talked to anyone, just the dispatcher on the radio in the morning. The same thoughts kept spinning in my head, and I could feel loneliness starting to press down on me. About 50 miles from Kingman, on a deserted stretch without a single house, I saw a girl on the shoulder with her hand raised. She looked about 25, with wavy brown hair to her shoulders, in faded jeans and a bright red hoodie, a beat-up black backpack with a torn strap hanging on one shoulder. I tapped the brakes and told myself I'd at least ask, because in that heat even a breakdown turns bad quick, and I don't leave people to bake out there. No cars behind me, nothing ahead but shimmer, so I put on hazards and rolled to a stop about 10 meters past her. Window down, I shouted if she needed help, and she nodded fast, almost too fast, then jogged to the steps. She climbed in and slammed the door hard enough to rattle my clipboard, then immediately twisted toward the side mirror like she expected headlights to pop over the rise. Up close, she looked exhausted. Sun-pinked face, a scrape on one knuckle, dust ground into the knees of those jeans. "Where you headed?" I asked. "Just forward, anywhere. Just away from here," she said. Her voice shook, her hands shook, and she hugged the pack like it might get yanked away any second. I told myself she was just nervous. Some folks see a big rig and think serial killer, I get it. But the way she kept biting her lip and checking that mirror made it feel like something was right behind us. I eased back onto the highway, steady throttle. We drove in silence for maybe 5 minutes, the cab full of AC hum and the little squeak from a loose pen in the dash tray. Then I caught it in my own mirror, a black and white way back, lights off, hanging at a steady distance. Regular patrol, I thought, not my business, keep it legal. 30 seconds later, red and blue popped, and the siren gave one short yelp. I said, "Okay," hit hazards again, and started slowing. The girl exhaled hard and dropped her head into her hands. "What's going on?" I asked, but she didn't answer, just froze there with her fingers digging into the fabric of the pack. I took the shoulder, gravel pinging the tanks, set the brake, and rolled the window down, both hands up on the wheel like they teach you at orientation. The officer came up my side. He barely looked at me, just passed me at her and said, "Miss, get out of the cab, now." She moved slow, hands up, fingers curled into tight little fists, and climbed down. He turned her around, cuffed her without any fight, and walked her to the push bumper. Her face was blank, that weird calm some people get when they've already accepted the next 10 minutes. I stayed in the seat because that's the smart thing. No sudden moves, no opinions. Another unit pulled in behind the first, nose angled. The first officer came back, neutral voice. "License, registration, bill of lading." I handed everything over. He asked when I'd picked her up. 10 minutes ago, maybe, I said. "Did she give you anything?" "No." "Did she enter your trailer?" "No, sir." Sweat was running down my back even with the AC. He took a long look at my paperwork, stepped back, and talked into his radio. "Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to know how a load like mine works." The trailer was sealed with a numbered metal tag that had to match my bill. If I pop that early, I'm eating the fallout. Receiver headache, company discipline, and if something's short, I'm in it. The second officer walked up holding something I hadn't clocked. Her black backpack, now in a clear bag, plus a hard glasses case he'd pulled from a side pocket. The first officer asked if I'd consent to open the trailer, just to rule things out. I said I needed to call dispatch. He nodded. I dialed. My dispatcher sounded annoyed. It was late Friday. But when I said DPS wanted inside, his tone flipped. "You're not breaking that seal without a supervisor on with them. Put the officer on," he said. I handed my phone out the window. While they talked, the second cop cracked the glasses case by the cruiser. He stopped for a beat, looked at me, then back at whatever was inside, and stepped away to speak low into his mic. The first officer's posture changed a little, just enough that you'd notice if you've been stopped before. He gave my phone back and told me to shut the truck down. I killed the engine, set the key on the dash, hands open. "Step out for me," he said. I climbed down slow, boots crunching in the shoulder gravel. He asked again, "Did she give you anything?" "No," I said. A few cars drifted by, rubberneckers slowing like they always do. I stood by my steps and watched her through the back window of the cruiser, head against the glass, staring straight ahead. The second unit nosed farther into the lane, turning this into a scene. My trailer ticked as it cooled, the smell of hot brakes mixing with dust, and the first officer watched my face for a lie, then turned away and keyed his radio while I stood in the heat, listening to my engine tick as it cooled while the cop talked on the radio. Then he came back to me, asked for my license and cargo documents, checked everything and said, "You're fine, sir, but don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. It's a state law violation. Next time there'll be a fine." I nodded and asked what she'd done. He was silent for a moment, then answered, "Robbery of a store 20 miles from here. She used your truck to escape. You're lucky we tracked her down quickly." I looked at the patrol car. The girl was sitting in the back seat staring at the floor. The cop gave me a verbal warning, told me to drive. I started the engine and pulled back into traffic. The rest of that leg I stayed under the limit, hands tight on the wheel, watching mirrors for another unit. At the next truck stop, I almost pulled in out of habit, then kept going, because I didn't want any strangers knocking on my door with questions, and also, I just wanted to drop the load and be done. Dispatch called to confirm DPS notes and told me, in that voice like you're a kid, to remember company policy about riders. I said yes, lesson learned. By the time I hit the beltway, the sun was sliding down, and I was replaying every second. Her hands, the way she checked the mirror, the way she didn't argue when he cuffed her. None of it made sense to me yet, so I parked at the motel by the receiver, cheap place with doors that opened to the lot, and grabbed a plastic key card from a bored clerk. In the room, I did the routine. Boots off, AC on high, TV remote with half the numbers rubbed off, and I threw my phone on the charger while I wrote up my log. Local news came on, standard stuff about heat warnings and a freeway lane closure, and then her face filled the screen. Same red hoodie in the booking photo, hair messier, eyes glassy like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. The anchor said her name, and I turned the volume up. Ashley Morgan, 26, arrested this afternoon on suspicion of armed robbery at a Willow Beach convenience store. They ran a clip from a security camera. A figure in a red hoodie at the counter, both hands visible, and the clerk flinching. The anchor kept going like it was just another crime segment. According to investigators, the suspect produced a handgun during the incident, he said, and they flashed a still photo of a pistol in an evidence tray, black, compact, with the slide locked back. The clerk was shot once in the shoulder and transported in stable condition. A 9mm pistol was recovered at the time of arrest. I felt my mouth go dry. I hadn't even offered her water, because that glasses case I saw by the cruiser must have been where she kept it, and that meant there had been a loaded gun in my cab while I was doing 65 and trying to make my window. The motel wall AC rattled like it always does, and I sat there counting how many times I'd said the wrong thing that day without realizing it. 2 hours earlier, she'd been in my passenger seat, a loaded gun in her bag, and all it would have taken was a joke, a wrong exit, a twitch in my voice. After that night, I stopped telling it like a hitchhiker story and kept it simple. I kept the job 3 years, ran the miles, and never picked up another hitchhiker, no matter how desperate they looked. Back in the summer of 2021, I was hauling agricultural equipment from Phoenix to Tucson on US Route 60, a job I'd been doing for 7 years. Route 60 at night is just blacktop and scrub broken up by reflector posts and the odd jackrabbit, and if you're lucky, a distant set of taillights way out ahead, which is why I liked it. No surprises, Just me and the hum of the Peterbilt and the same checkpoints I could hit with my eyes closed. Obviously not literally. That August night around 9, windows down and finally not breathing furnace air, I spotted a guy on the shoulder waving both arms like he was trying to flag a helicopter. No car, no bike, just a skinny dude in a ratty t-shirt and jeans, white sneakers caked in dust, and something about the whole picture didn't add up. I couldn't tell you what exactly, but my foot went to the brake without ever touching the floorboard, easing me down to a crawl instead of a stop. I kept him on my left, hazard lights on, my lane positioned tight because I didn't want anyone else coming up and clipping us. And I leaned out and yelled, "You good, man?" He stepped closer than I liked. Never get within arm's reach. Rule I learned the hard way over the years. And he shouted that his name was Danny. His pickup died a mile back. He needed a ride to town to call a tow. The shoulder was nothing but gravel and creosote bushes, and with no truck in sight, a mile can be anything out there. So I told him, "I can take you to the next exit," while my hand slid to the pepper spray clipped to my dash, not making a show of it, just there. Company policy says no riders, period, 'cause you can lose your job and your load and sometimes your skin. But leaving someone to bake in the dark doesn't sit right, and there's no cell service in those dips. So I cracked the door and said, "Passenger side, do not touch anything," and hit the door locks as soon as he climbed in. He said thanks, too quick, like he was trying to get the word out ahead of himself, and buckled up wrong, under the arm, twitchy, eyes on the mirror instead of the road. For a couple miles we rode in silence except for the engine and the rattle from the chains on the deck. I rechecked my straps automatically habit, and I asked where he'd broken down exactly. He jerked a thumb back at the dark, like that explained anything. "Somewhere past that hill," he said, which could have been 5 different hills. Red flag. He smelled like sweat and gasoline. Not unusual if you've been tinkering with a carb, but the gas was faint and the sweat was nerves. "Need to call someone?" I offered, tapping my phone mount. "I've got bars off and on. You can try." He waved it off so fast you'd think it burned. "No one to call, man. I just gotta get to town." Then he shifted, checked the side mirror again, then the passenger one, and I thought, who's he expecting out here? I kept my speed steady, not telegraphing anything, and I slid the spray a little closer with a couple fingers. Now, before I explain the next bit, you need to understand how quiet that stretch runs after dark. If someone's tailing you, you'll see their lights for 10 straight minutes, no hiding it. We had nobody behind us, no one ahead either, just empty road and the occasional white cattle gate out in the desert. So Danny's mirror checking made 0 sense, and I filed it under future problem, while I focused on present ones, like keeping the rig in its groove on crumbling shoulder when he suddenly said, "Pull over, I'm gonna puke." "Hang on," I said, scanning for a safe spot, and there it was, a dirt access road punching off the shoulder with enough room to get my trailer straight. I eased over, hazards on, kept my distance from the ditch. He popped the door before we fully stopped, another red flag, and hopped down, hands on knees like he was gonna hurl. Then he staggered a few yards into the brush. I watched him in the passenger mirror because that's what you do. You watch hands, not faces. His hands weren't bracing or wiping his mouth. His right went into his pocket. He angled himself so he thought my line of sight was blocked by the door and the trailer angle. I trimmed the wheel a hair to keep him in view and saw the glow. The brief, unmistakable rectangle of light when a screen wakes up. He started thumbing fast, shoulders up, head down. So he did have a phone. He'd lied. My pulse went sharp, not panic, more like flipping a breaker. My mind did the math, no car back there, no legitimate phone call to make, mirror checks, lied about the phone, asked me to stop on a dead stretch next to an access road with tire ruts running fresh into the desert. I clocked those as we pulled in, 2 sets, not hours. I didn't sit and debate it. I slid the shifter, brought the revs back up, foot to clutch, eyes on my driver's mirror to keep him out of my blind spot. He spun around when he heard the engine come up, one hand still holding the phone, the other raising like he was about to say, "Hold on." He shouted something, sounded like, "Wait, don't," but I was already rolling, slow at first, 'cause you don't jackknife your own trailer to prove a point. He jogged after the step, tried to grab the polished handle, missed, and I felt that weird pull between being a decent human and being a live one. I kept it in the lane, brought it up from 5 to 10 to 15, hazard still clicking like a metronome in my ear. He kept yelling, feet kicking up dust that floated in my taillights, a shape shrinking. I didn't look away from the road long enough to read his face. I just watched his hands, and the phone, and the space between us stretching. I pushed the pedal a little more, let the torque do its thing, and the mirror made him small, then smaller, then just a speck, and I accelerated, watching him shrink in the mirror. Less than a mile down the road, headlights appeared behind me, a pickup truck coming up fast, way too fast. I knew I was being chased. I buried the throttle, but a loaded semi doesn't sprint. The pickup closed, filled my mirrors, and I could see 2 men up front, the passenger on a phone. They dropped right, trying to slice past and nose in, so I eased right too and blocked, keeping them from shoving me onto the dirt. I hit the voice button on my dash. "Call 911. When the dispatcher answered, I yelled mile marker, direction, and a quick description. White half-ton, busted passenger mirror, bed toolbox, 2 male occupants. As soon as I said being pursued, the pickup braked hard, dove its nose, and spun a sloppy U-turn across the empty lanes, taillights bouncing back into the dark. I held speed and told dispatch I'd ride to the next lit stop. They kept me talking, asked about weapons, asked if anyone was injured, told me units were in the area. 10 minutes later, I rolled into the gas station off 79 in Florence, parked broadside to the storefront for visibility, and killed the engine. A Pinal County cruiser slid in with lights on, nose to my bumper. I stayed in the cab until the deputy tapped his flashlight against my door and told me to step into the camera view. He had me keep my hands where he could see them, standard, and then we moved under the canopy. The deputy introduced himself as Ortiz. Calm voice, firm posture. He took my license and bills of lading, asked for a linear account starting with the man on the shoulder. I gave it straight. Name Danny, claimed no phone, asked me to stop near an access road with fresh ruts, stepped out and texted, then the chase. Ortiz nodded through it, then said, "You're not the first." He told me there'd been a run of attacks on truckers along 60 and 79 over the last 6 months, same setup every time. A decoy flags you with a breakdown story, texts your location to a crew parked dark on side roads. They box you, show a gun if they need to, and get you stopped long enough to crack the trailer or take the whole rig. Quick in and out. They'd hit produce and equipment haulers mostly. "They're sloppy but fast," he said. I gave him everything I remembered about Danny. Mid-30s, thin, ratty shirt, jeans, dusty white sneakers, jittery, smelled faintly like gas. Ortiz wrote it down, radioed it out, and had dispatch note the pickup's mirror and toolbox. He told me, flat, "Do not pick up anyone on the shoulder out there. Call us instead." He offered an escort to the county line. I said fuel and light would do. He parked where he could watch the highway while I topped off, then waved me out. I think about it when the road goes quiet, and there's nobody in the mirrors. What would have happened if I'd braked when he said he was sick, or if I'd missed that glow in the glass? And sometimes there's a tug when I pass someone waving at night because it's real now and then. But I've got a name on the door, a load that isn't mine, and people waiting on the other end. So I keep the doors locked. I call things in. I stick to I-10 where there's traffic and light out here, and when a figure steps out on the shoulder, I keep my lane, and I keep driving always. "5 years ago, me and Ben were making a cross-country move to pick up our last belongings and our 2 dogs, Rocky and Jesse. We'd already done the route once, and this was the sprint back. Get in, load up, get out. No sightseeing, just gas, bathrooms, and drive. I don't remember the exact state, Utah or Colorado, because those midnight rest areas all feel copy-pasted when you're running on caffeine and sunflower seeds. Around 3:30 a.m., after Ben had pushed 4 hours straight, we rolled into a small roadside stop with 1 car and a couple of trucks tucked way in the far corner. I told him I'd run to the bathroom and he could smoke and keep an eye on the dogs. The bathrooms were behind a small mound, one of those landscaped hills that blocked the view from the lot. So once I rounded it, I couldn't see our Honda at all. Ben still walked most of the way with me. He does that when it's late and weirdly quiet. And I told him I was fine, but I let him be protective because it was empty enough that even the soda machine hum sounded loud. I ducked into the women's, did what I had to do, rinsed my hands quick, and came back out already thinking about leashes and waste bags and getting us back on the road. Ben handed me Rocky and Jesse, then said he'd hit the men's room. 2 minutes, he said, and I nodded because I wasn't nervous. Our Belgian shepherds don't let strangers within arm's length when it's just me. I walked them a loop by the shrubs and the short fence line that separated the parking lot from a patch of gravel. While the dogs were sniffing, one of the trucks from the far corner rumbled to life and rolled forward, slow. I figured he was rejoining the highway. I bent, bagged what I needed to bag, and headed toward the rusted trash can by a pole light. The truck took a wider arc than made sense, too wide, easing toward the edge of the lot instead of the exit. Then the high beams punched me right in the eyes, clean across the asphalt like someone holding a flashlight too close to your face. I threw up a hand. Hey! Just a reflex wave to say, please stop blinding me. I tossed the bags and started back to the Honda. That's when the driver started flashing. 1, 2, 3, pause, again. I slowed. Did I drop something? Was he warning me about a flat? Rocky's ears pinned forward. Jessie leaned into my leg like she does when she doesn't like something. The truck crept closer, still pulsing the lights and sets, like a signal I didn't understand. I picked up the pace. Ben, I called toward the hillside, not shouting, just letting the name carry, because it was silent enough to hear footsteps if there were any. The dogs were between me and the truck now, leashes tight in my fists. The cab's outline was big, older model, squared hood, and there was a shape behind the windshield, but I couldn't make out hands. The beams hammered again, on off, and my chest did that tight twist of being watched with purpose. I got to the driver's side of our Honda and hesitated. If the trucker was being helpful, I'd feel stupid for ignoring him. If he wasn't, I wasn't stepping into a blind spot. I cupped my hand over my eyes and stared at the truck, angry now because the lights were making my vision starry. "What do you want?" I said, loud enough to carry. The truck idled closer by inches, wheels turning just enough to make that gravel crunch that sounds like chewing. The flashing didn't stop. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how our routine worked on this route. We didn't leave things in view. Cash stayed on us. Dogs loaded first, doors locked, keys in my right jacket pocket, spare magnet key under the rear frame. Ben's idea, not mine. We weren't paranoid, just careful, and that's why the flashing messed with me, because it felt like an interruption to a system that kept us from making dumb mistakes. Rocky gave a low growl, not loud, that rumble that's more warning than threat. Jesse followed suit. I said, "Easy." Because they were reading me, not him. I checked back over my shoulder for Ben and registered nothing. No footsteps, no door swing. The truck's brights went off, then on, several times in a row, faster, like he was getting impatient. I could hear my own breath, and it was ridiculous how quiet the place was for a highway stop. "Did I drop something?" I called, pointing stupidly at the ground, as if he could see that gesture. No response. The truck rolled forward another foot, the grill now close enough that I could make out bug splatter and a bent license plate bracket. The passenger window stayed up. Nobody leaned out. Just light, engine, presence. I didn't want to turn my back, but I needed to get the dogs in and get Ben. I edged along the Honda's side, the dogs shielding me. Good dogs, focused, alert. And I reached the rear door handle. The lights kept strobing my peripheral. "Okay," I said, to myself or them, not sure, and I yanked the handle just to have a barrier between me and the beams. It was locked because I hadn't hit the fob yet. My brain did that quick inventory. Keys, right pocket. Ben, 30 yards away. Truck, too close. I stopped and glared back at the cab, jaw tight enough to hurt. "What the hell does he want?" ran through my head like a ticker. Rocky barked once, sharp. The beams froze. For the first time since it started, the lights stayed steady. Engine still idling. No movement. The sudden stillness felt worse than the flashing, like whoever was in there had finished counting. I slid my right hand into my jacket, eyes on the truck the whole time, and finally the headlights stopped flashing, and I reached for my keys. Both dogs went rigid at the same time and let out these thin whines, not panic, but the kind that says something just changed. And then I heard it too, the metallic click from the truck, that latch sound you can't mistake. I turned and saw a leg swing down, work boot onto the running board, slow, like he had all the time in the world, or like he wanted me to clock the movement. My brain jumped to dumb options. Say something nice, pretend I didn't see, walk fast. But my feet didn't pick one. The door was open enough that the cab light made a rectangle, and the boot shifted, testing weight. "Hey," I started, but it came out dry. Rocky's leash went tight. Jessie's hackles weren't up, but her body leaned forward like a brace. The truck's engine kept that low idle and I could smell diesel, which made no sense because the night had been clean a second ago. I didn't scream because screaming felt like declaring the wrong thing, and I didn't run because turning my back on someone halfway out of a truck didn't feel smart either. Footsteps hit behind me, quick, familiar cadence, and Ben's arm wrapped across my shoulders, pulling me half behind his side in one motion, while his other hand went up, middle finger straight. He yelled, loud and flat, "Back off, creep!" The timing was like a switch. The leg paused, withdrew like a tape rewinding, and the door slammed, hard enough to bang something loose inside the cab. The truck jolted into a turn, rear swinging a little wide, tires chirping on the painted line, and then it punched out of the lot and onto the highway ramp so fast the dogs flinched. I was shaking, but not from drama, from the dump of adrenaline you can't argue with, and I kept saying, "He was flashing, he kept flashing," because I needed Ben to understand I hadn't misread it. He was already nodding. "Yeah, I know what that is," he said, eyes on the point where the taillights had disappeared like he wanted to catch them reappearing. "Some truckers do that to call in working girls at these spots. It's a stupid signal system, like they figure if you walk over they'll talk price. It's not all of them, obviously, but it's a thing." I said, "At me?" which sounded ridiculous coming out of my mouth, like I needed confirmation that I had been the target and not the trash can. He kept his arm around me, not for cuddling. We weren't in that headspace, but because it kept us moving in a controlled way toward the Honda. "He thought you were alone," Ben said. "He saw dogs, but he didn't see me. And you didn't walk over, so he escalated. When I showed up, he bailed, 'cause he's not looking for an argument with a guy and two big dogs. Rocky and Jesse settled when Ben took the leashes, immediate, like they knew a shift just happened, and I unlocked the door and got them in. I didn't want to sit in the driver's seat with my legs under a dashboard facing the lot, so I stood in the doorway while Ben scanned the asphalt. Then he said, "We're leaving now." No debate. He cut across me, tossed his smoke, grabbed the wheel while I buckled the dog's harness clips to the seat anchors. Fast, practiced. He reversed, checked both sides, and we merged back onto the empty lane. I watched the mirrors longer than I should have, waiting for that same roofline to show up again, and it never did. We didn't talk for 5 minutes. Then I told him every beat, where the truck had been, how it moved, the light cycles, the moment the beam stopped, the click, and he kept saying, "I got you, and that guy can go to hell," and my head finally slowed down enough for the next part to land. We had done the smart things, and it still got close. I was grossed out. The whole thing, the way he tested it, the assumption. He obviously thought I was alone, or he wouldn't have climbed down, and I don't for a second think he just wanted to chat. Not with how persistent the lights were and how fast he tore off the second Ben showed up. Since then, I don't get out at empty rest stops alone, not even with the dogs, because yeah, they're big, but a cab door and a fast grab is bigger. And what really sticks with me is, I was layered up because it was cold, and I was driving a newer car, and there was nothing about me that said I was looking for anything. So if a guy like that reads "female alone near a trash can" as an invitation, how many women has he tested this on? And did every single one have someone appear at the last second like I did? Or did one of them walk a little too close and get themselves cornered against a bumper? Because that thought won't leave me. We reported it to Highway Patrol the next day. Time, approximate mile marker, rest area layout, everything we could remember. But without a plate, there wasn't much to do. The dispatcher said they'd increase patrols in that stretch, and we thanked her and kept driving west. And I hope it helped, but I doubt it. Because guys like that move and learn and keep going until someone stops them. And if nobody did, then he's still out there on some empty exit, still flashing his lights at lone women in the dark.